She had no idea I saw it. That glowing screen, that one line, blinking like a signal flare through 17 years of memories. Thank God he's not my real dad. I stared at it for a full minute. Not blinking. Not breathing. Just unraveling. Her mom, my wife, was upstairs, watching one of those true crime shows she loved, narrating every twist like some cheerful executioner. Our daughter, Lily, had stormed off to her room, slammed the door, and blasted music so loud it rattled the hallway frames. And there I stood in the kitchen, holding a dish towel and a silence that suddenly felt radioactive. I had just made her lasagna, her favorite. I'd picked up her shampoo earlier that day because she mentioned she was low. I'd even left work early to install a new bulb in the porch light so she wouldn't trip again at night. I was the dad who remembered the details, the quiet ones, the ones that are supposed to matter. And still, apparently, not real. The word real did something to me. I wasn't angry. Not yet. It was worse. I felt sidelined. Like someone hit a mute button on my whole identity. I placed the phone back exactly where it had been. The screen went dark. But the sentence was now etched on the inside of my skull, glowing behind my eyelids every time I blinked. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed beside my wife, staring at the ceiling. Her breathing was steady, deep, peaceful, innocent, almost. And that made it worse. I kept thinking, what if she knew? What if she's always known? The next morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called in sick. Told my assistant I had a stomach bug, which wasn't a total lie. Something was eating me alive. Then I ordered the kit. Saliva. Simple instructions. Quiet betrayal. I didn't tell anyone. Not Lily. Not her mom. Not my therapist. Not even my best friend. Just me and the ticking countdown. 7 business days. I spent those days floating. Like I was watching my life through a window, not inside it. Every laugh at dinner felt a beat off. Every time Lily said, "Dad," it scraped. I watched her interactions like a detective at a crime scene. How she hugged me. How she said goodnight. Was it polite? Was it real? Then I started rewinding everything. The time she snapped at me for being too protective. The weird silence when I joked about her having my stubborn streak. The way she always compared herself to her cousin Emma, saying Emma had a real family. And then I remembered something worse. A moment from years ago. Christmas. She'd drawn a family tree at school. I found it in the trash weeks later, crumpled. I smoothed it out her mom, and a question mark. Right next to the dad label. At the time, I thought it was just a kid being imaginative. Now, I realized it might have been a question she'd never had the guts to ask out loud. The 6th night was the hardest. We watched a movie together. I sat between them, a bowl of popcorn on my lap, and her legs curled under her like they always had. Halfway through the movie, she leaned her head on my shoulder. And for a second, I forgot. Forgot the message. Forgot the test. Forgot the ache. I nearly kissed her forehead, but I didn't. Because that little voice came back. The one that had started narrating my life like some twisted inner monologue. She doesn't think you're real. Not the real thing. Just close enough until she finds out who is. The next morning, the package arrived. The test came in an unmarked white envelope, folded like it had something to hide. Thursday morning. Mailbox. Junk ads. A water bill. And then this. Return address from a lab in Colorado. Plain. Efficient. Clinical. Like the truth it carried. I stood in the garage, next to my tool bench. The smell of sawdust and motor oil hung in the air, grounding me. I opened it without ceremony. No drumroll. No trembling hands. Just a quiet click of the blade slicing the top open. It was all there in one sentence. Probability of paternity, 0%. Not the father. I didn't drop it. Didn't stagger. I just stood there, reading it twice, as if a second glance might fix the typo in the universe. But the words held. Immovable. Cold. That sentence ended a 17-year story with a single keystroke. I folded the letter in half, slid it back into the envelope, then pulled out the second copy, the one meant for additional parties if desired. I didn't throw it away. Instead, I walked into the living room, past the photographs on the wall, vacations, birthdays, Lily holding my hand on the first day of school, and placed the envelope on the mantel. Dead center. Like a trophy or a warning. The irony wasn't lost on me. It sat next to a snow globe she made in 4th grade. One where she painted a tiny stick figure version of me, smiling with a dog that died 5 years ago. Her version of me. Her idea of dad. Dinner that night was surreal. Meatloaf. Steamed carrots. Casual cruelty. My wife was scrolling through her phone, showing Lily some meme about dads dancing at weddings. They were both giggling. The kind of laughter that used to make me smile. Now, it scraped against my ribs. I chewed slowly. Watched their faces. Their bond. Then, I cleared my throat. They both looked at me. Do you know who her real father is? I asked, like I was inquiring about the weather. My wife froze, fork midair. Her eyes snapped to mine like a deer clocking headlights. Lily blinked twice, her smile slipping. What kind of question is that? She said, more confused than offended. I didn't answer. I just leaned back in my chair, tapped the envelope on the mantel once with my index finger. Once, and stood. Silence. I went upstairs without another word. No speech. No lecture. No raised voice. The kind of silence that bruises. I brushed my teeth. Got into bed. Faced the wall. 20 minutes later, I heard them downstairs. The creak of footsteps. A whisper. Then another. And then, silence again. They had seen it. The envelope wasn't just paper anymore. It was a fuse. And I'd left it right where they could reach it. Her mother's idea, of course. Let's not turn this into some brooding drama, she said that Saturday morning, smoothing her blouse like it was armor. We'll go to my parents. Let Lily be around family. It'll help all of us reset. Reset. Like grief was a glitch and family just needed a hard reboot. I didn't argue. I didn't say a word. Just nodded and drove. 2 hours in silence. Lily with her earbuds in the back seat, staring out the window like I didn't exist. My wife scrolling on her phone next to me, texting someone she quickly minimized when I glanced her way. I parked outside her parents' place, that gaudy faux Victorian with too many lawn ornaments. The kind of house that looked like it tried too hard to look warm. Her brother, Ted, was already on the porch with a beer. Still as smug as I remembered. Still laughing too loud, like he was permanently performing for an invisible audience. And beside him, Emma, Lily's favorite cousin. 19, maybe 20 now. Same age as the secrets buried in this family. They all hugged, clapped shoulders, smiled with teeth. I stood just behind it all, like a shadow nobody invited. Inside, it was all potato salad and small talk. Ted tried to rope me into some discussion about car maintenance, but I nodded and said nothing. I watched Lily and Emma whispering on the couch, passing a phone back and forth. And then it happened. Lily pulled the envelope from her backpack. The second copy. The one from the mantel. She waved it like it was a party trick. Want to see something wild? She said, laughing that brittle, fake laugh she'd picked up lately. Guess who's not my dad? Emma took the envelope. Her smile fell before she even opened it. She didn't need to read the words. She recognized the weight of it. The ghost inside. Her hands started to shake. She set it down gently, like it might explode, and muttered, I need air. I followed her. Out to the porch. Past the garden gnome that always leaned a little too far left. She sat on the swing, hugging her arms like they could hold the truth in. I didn't sit. I leaned against the post and said quietly, What aren't you saying? She wouldn't look at me. You shouldn't have done that test, she said finally. Her voice, soft, almost reverent, like she was reciting a eulogy. Why? She hesitated, eyes glassy. Then, because if it's true, if you're not her dad. She paused, swallowed hard. Then the man who is, he's not just her father. She looked up at me, finally. He's your blood too. And just like that, the air changed. Heavy. Electric. Like a storm had stepped into the room. I felt my knees lock. My chest tightened. I couldn't speak. Not your dad. Not a stranger. Someone, closer. Emma stood abruptly and walked inside, leaving me alone with a name I hadn't even heard yet, already echoing like a curse. Someone with my blood. I didn't turn the lights on when we got home. Just walked through the house by muscle memory and let the darkness keep me company. My wife didn't ask what Emma said. She was too busy pretending things were fine, humming in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine like she hadn't just seen our daughter flaunt a DNA bomb in front of blood relatives. Lily slammed her bedroom door. Again, I didn't even flinch. Instead, I went to the attic. It had been years since I'd opened that box, the one labeled Henderson's side / old stuff. Inside were yellowed photo albums, receipts from hotels we'd long forgotten, birthday cards from people who probably thought I was dead by now. I turned pages like I was flipping through landmines. Emma's words kept looping in my head. He's your blood too. And then I saw it. A photo. Thanksgiving, 2005. My grandfather's house. There she was, my wife, sitting on the arm of a recliner, leaning into someone with a half-empty beer and a grin that never reached his eyes. James, my cousin, the one who dropped off the map after that inheritance debacle, the one who always called himself the black sheep, like it was some badge of honor. Quiet, smug, snake-like in conversation. Never brought a +1 to family dinners, but always had a story about some woman he was seeing. And now I was seeing him too. In Lily's cheekbones, in the curve of her smile, in the way she flared her nostrils when she got annoyed. Exactly like he did at that Christmas poker game years ago when I caught him bluffing with a 7-2 offsuit. I sat there with the album open on my lap for what felt like an hour, my fingers locked around the edges like I was trying to choke it. Eventually, I picked up the landline. I didn't trust my cell. Called my Aunt Margaret. She was old enough to remember everything, and just gossipy enough to still be honest. Hey, Aunt Max. Quick question, I said, keeping my voice casual. Did James ever stay with you in, say, 2006? There was a pause. I could hear her tapping something, probably a candy dish. Oh yes, she said. He stayed that whole spring. That was the year he was finding himself, remember? Your mother called it a nervous breakdown. And was anyone else there? Another pause. Well, your girl. Karen. She came by then too, didn't she? That was before you two got serious. I remember 'cause I told her to stop drinking my cooking sherry. I felt something snap under my ribs. Are you sure? I asked. Of course I'm sure. They were thick as thieves that month. Always off in the garden or taking walks. I thought maybe they were, you know? But I didn't say anything. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat there, hands trembling, head buzzing. I opened Facebook, not my account. A burner I'd made years ago when I helped a friend catch her cheating boyfriend. I searched James R. Henderson. His profile was private, but his photo wasn't. That smug bastard. Same smirk. Same angular face. Same eyes Lily had started getting compliments on in high school. I dragged the photo next to one of Lily from last Thanksgiving. Side by side. A mirror. No test needed. My daughter, my not daughter, was the spitting image of a man who once tried to sell our grandfather's wedding ring for gas money. And my wife had known. She had to know. Because that kind of resemblance doesn't sneak past a mother. Not unless she wants it to. The coffee hadn't even finished brewing. Sunlight hadn't made it past the blinds. Lily was still upstairs, probably asleep, or pretending to be. I sat at the kitchen island, not moving, not blinking, as my wife walked in barefoot, humming, hair pulled up like it was just another Tuesday. I waited until she poured her cup. Then, was it James? She froze mid-sip. The color drained from her face like someone had flipped a switch inside her skull. For a full 5 seconds, she didn't breathe. Just stared at me, cup in hand, suspended like a photograph. Then she set it down slowly, carefully, like the truth might shatter if she moved too fast. Her voice came out hoarse. Why would you ask that? I didn't answer. Just stared. Let the silence gnaw at her bones. She blinked. Twice. Then, finally, a whisper. It was a mistake. I nodded. Of course. Always is. We weren't serious, she added, as if that changed the architecture of the betrayal. As if the weight of a secret got lighter with time and phrasing. I didn't move. Didn't raise my voice. But you let me raise her thinking she was mine, I said, voice flat. You let him disappear. You let me give her my name. My time. My life. She opened her mouth, but I held up a finger. No. Just answer this. Did you ever think I deserved to know? She stared at the counter like it might save her. She needed stability, she said finally. You were better than he ever could be. I laughed. Once. Quiet. More air than sound. Stability, I echoed. Is that what you call 17 years of a lie? Because it sure feels like a goddamn demolition. Still no apology. Still no ownership. Just this practiced martyrdom in her eyes, like I was being unreasonable for caring. I loved you, she said suddenly. I chose you. But you didn't choose truth, I said, standing. You chose convenience. I left her in the kitchen, her coffee going cold next to the half slice of toast she never finished. The crumbs looked like something shattered. That night, after Lily went to bed, I sat at my desk in the garage. I didn't turn on the lamp, just let the blue light of the screen wash over me. I opened the email draft I'd started hours ago, attached the DNA results. First page only, bold and undeniable. No message, no pleasantries, just the subject line. You might want to sit down. I hit send and leaned back in my chair, listening to the night hum with secrets. James replied at 2:14 p.m. the next day. 2 sentences. No greeting. No apology. No disbelief. She's mine? I never knew. What do you want me to do? I stared at the screen like it might blink first. There was no anger in his message. No shock. Just blank curiosity. Like I'd told him he'd want a free toaster, and now he wanted pickup instructions. It made my skin crawl. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to share anything with him yet. Not words, not thoughts, not even hate. Instead, I got to work. Not the kind you do with your hands, but the kind that starts in the shadows of your brain, creeping out slowly, piece by piece, as something dark begins to take shape. It started with a text to Emma. I need your help. She took 3 minutes to reply. The bubble blinked, vanished, reappeared. Depends. Are you going to break the whole family, or just the part that deserves it? I almost smiled. Just the ones who deserve it, I typed. We met at a coffee shop across town, neutral ground. One of those chain places where no one makes eye contact, where secrets can sit in the air between cappuccinos and no one notices. She wore sunglasses even though we were indoors. She'd always been the observant one in that family, the one who knew too much too early and learned how to keep it sealed. I figured it out, I said, sliding over an envelope with printed photos inside. Emma peeked at the top one, James holding a drink, smirking. He was with your aunt in '06. I confirmed it. She looked up. Her jaw tensed. I always wondered. I need you to help me make her see it. Lily. No, I said. Her. Emma blinked. My mom. I shook my head. Your aunt. The pause was sharp. You want me to blindside her? No, I said calmly. I want you to give her clarity. At the right moment. Emma crossed her arms. Define, right? I leaned back, letting her feel the answer. When everyone's watching, I laid it out slowly. A timeline of photos, Lily as a toddler, me teaching her to skate, a snapshot of James from the same era, a printed page of the DNA results, and finally, the message Lily had sent, the one that started it all. I want her to read this, but not in private, not over wine and tears where she can spin her story again. I want her cornered. On stage. Emma's mouth tightened. You want a stage? I nodded. She exhaled. That graduation party in 2 weeks. You weren't invited, were you? Nope. She tapped the table once, then again. Thinking. Calculating. All right, she said quietly. But I picked the timing. Deal. And you owe me. I already do. We left without hugging. Without making a scene. Just 2 quiet co-conspirators in a war that hadn't started yet. When I got home that night, I ignored my wife's attempt at casual conversation, ignored Lily's forced laughter from the other room. The house had already started to rot. I just needed the world to see it collapse. It was humid that morning, thick gin air that clung to your neck like someone whispering something you didn't want to hear. I wasn't on the guest list. Of course I wasn't. My name had been trimmed from the program like I was some administrative typo. 17 years of fatherhood, and I'd been demoted to a ghost. But ghosts can still attend. I wore a navy blazer I hadn't touched since Lily's middle school recital. Sat 3 rows from the back, far right, just behind a pillar tall enough to keep me mostly hidden. Not out of shame, out of strategy. From that distance, she looked so much like her mother it hurt. Same posture. Same effortless smirk. She walked across that stage and shook the principal's hand like the world was already hers. And maybe, for a while, it had been. I didn't clap. Not out of spite. Out of preservation. Emma caught my eye once, just briefly, then looked away before it drew attention. She was wearing pale blue, her "I'm just a guest" camouflage. But in her purse was the payload. 1 letter, typed and signed, sealed in an ivory envelope. Same brand as the one that had detonated my life. After the ceremony, everyone flooded into the reception hall. Balloons, cookies, bad punch. Her mother had rented out the event space at the local community center. Low-key but elegant, She had once described it. I parked across the street, watched through the tinted windshield. Windows down, engine off, hands on the steering wheel like I was still trying to drive anything in this mess. Emma texted me a single emoji, open mailbox with raised flag. It was done. She had slipped the envelope into Lily's purse as she leaned in for a hug. A hug that lasted 1 second longer than necessary, long enough to finish the job. Inside, Lily was laughing with 2 friends. She reached into her purse, looking for lip gloss or maybe gum, and pulled out the envelope instead. Another one of Dad's guilt trips, she joked. I could imagine her tone, light, dismissive, vaguely cruel. The kind of voice teens use when they think they're untouchable. She opened it, started reading aloud. It wasn't long, just a few paragraphs. A condensed version of 17 years. A thank you, a warning, and then the line. Ask your real father why your DNA matches his. Ask him why he never came for you. That was the moment the room stopped moving. Plastic forks hovered midair. Conversations froze. The DJ's pre-programmed playlist kept rolling, something upbeat and offensively cheerful. Her hands were trembling. She looked up at Emma, then at her mother. Her mother's face had gone corpse pale. And then the final note of the trap. James stepped in from the side entrance. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Just stood there, wearing an ill-fitting suit, holding nothing but a crooked smile and years of absence like they were badges of honor. Lily's face morphed. Not shock. Not curiosity. Recognition. Because some truths don't need confirmation. They wear your bones. They echo in your smile. She backed into a table, knocked over a cup of punch. No one moved to help her. Her mother stepped forward, but Lily raised her hand like a stop sign. And for the first time in her life, I think she finally saw the room the way I'd been seeing it for weeks. Not a celebration. A crime scene. He didn't step over the threshold. Just lingered there, half shadow, half truth, like some ghost the family had collectively buried and now refused to name. His hands were in his pockets, chin tilted like he was amused, or drunk, or both. That same smirk that used to piss off every adult in the room at reunions. But now, that smirk was reflected in Lily's face like a cracked mirror. She didn't move, didn't blink. She just stared, her pupils darting from James to Emma, then down to the letter crumpled in her hand like it had betrayed her personally. You could see it happen. That moment, that shift. Her entire world rearranged itself behind her eyes. It wasn't gradual. It was instant. Like a safe finally clicking open after years of guessing the wrong code. First came disbelief. That half smile, the one she used when someone made a joke she didn't get but didn't want to admit it. Then the corners of her mouth twitched, dropped. Her knees buckled slightly. She reached for the back of a chair and missed. Someone else gasped. An aunt, maybe. Or some well-meaning neighbor who thought this was just another suburban celebration. Lily sat down hard, as if the gravity in the room had tripled just for her. Her mom moved toward her, voice soft but cracking. Sweetheart, listen. No. Lily snapped, and it was sharp enough to slice through the murmur of the room. James still hadn't spoken, still hadn't moved, but the weight of his presence was unbearable, pressing down on everyone like a coming storm no one could stop. And then he turned, walked away, not slowly, not dramatically, just done. Like this was a meeting he never wanted to attend and had already overstayed. He vanished around the corner. The door didn't slam, but the silence he left behind may as well have. Her mother crouched beside Lily, reaching for her hand. Lily pulled away like she'd touched fire. You lied to everyone, she whispered. Not yelled, not sobbed, just said it like she'd tasted poison and finally learned the recipe. Her mother flinched, and then Lily looked around the room and saw the faces. Every single person now watching her like she was the final act of a play they didn't know they'd paid to see. She stood, tossed the letter on the table like it was toxic, and walked toward the exit, barefoot, numb, unraveling, leaving her cap, her gown, and the version of her life she thought was real in a pile behind her. The first call came at 9:17 p.m. I saw the name flash across the screen while I was drying a coffee mug, the last one I ever drank from in that house. Lily. No emojis. No 3 Dad. Just her name, stark and hollow like a reminder carved in granite. I let it ring. The sound didn't even register as noise anymore. Just data, floating in air. She called again, then again, each time closer together, like she thought speed might make me forget the last 17 years had been based on a lie I didn't write, but lived. Then came the message. A wall of gray text on a black screen. I didn't mean what I texted. I was mad. Stupid. I didn't know. You're the only dad I've known. The only one who showed up. Please, just talk to me. I sat down in the garage. Lights off. Phone screen glowing like a candle held over a grave. And I opened the old drive I'd backed up years ago. The one where I dumped all the pictures from Lily's childhood after we upgraded phones and decided we'd be organized parents with a file system. Folder, 2009 spring. There she was, 7 years old. Mouth open, curled like a kitten on my chest after falling asleep during a thunderstorm. I'd stayed up the whole night with her on the couch because she swore the lightning would steal the house. Back then, she thought I could fight storms. I cropped it, attached it to a reply. Caption, the girl who didn't need blood to be mine. No greeting, no explanation, just that. Then I hit send, and went into my settings, found her name, and pressed block. The confirmation message popped up like a dare. Are you sure you want to block this contact? I didn't hesitate. Not because I stopped loving her, but because sometimes love gets buried under too many layers of betrayal to ever breathe again. She'd made her choice the day she laughed about a stranger being her real dad. Now she could learn what absence really felt like. Not a punishment, a consequence. The silence didn't explode, it calcified. Month by month, it hardened in the corners of the house like dust no one dared to touch. Lily's cap and gown still hung in the hallway closet, untouched since that day. Her mother stopped asking where I was going. She knew I wouldn't say, just like I knew she wouldn't admit that her carefully constructed version of reality had rotted from the inside out. Emma moved in with a friend across town. No fights, no drama, just a backpack, a cold goodbye, and a single sentence muttered on the way out. I'm done pretending this family makes sense. As for James, he ghosted them. After the graduation, he disappeared the same way he always had. Quietly, selfishly, like responsibility was a door he never meant to open. He didn't answer Lily's messages. Didn't react when she finally posted that passive-aggressive birthday photo of the two of them with the caption, better late than never. Even though it had been exactly that, too late and never real. Lily stayed with her mother, but she stopped laughing, stopped going out, stopped wearing her favorite lip gloss, and most of all, stopped looking in mirrors, because something had changed. Before, she saw whatever she wanted. Now she saw him. The jawline she used to contour with pride? It was his. The crooked dimple? His. Even the sarcastic arch of her left eyebrow, something her mom used to call her superpower, was suddenly poison. She couldn't scrub him out of her face. But worse, she couldn't scrub me in. The one who knew her bedtime routine without asking. The one who tucked love notes into her lunchboxes in middle school when she started hating herself. The one who drove 7 hours in a snowstorm to watch her sing backup for a band that forgot her name by morning. I was gone now, and she finally felt it. She tried. Oh, she tried. She posted throwbacks with captions like, "My real dad is the one who shows up," and tagged me. I never liked them. Never commented. Just let them drift into the algorithm like leaves in a gutter. She even wrote a letter once. Handwritten. For pages. Emma told me she found it in the mailbox addressed in Lily's loopy cursive. I burned it without reading. Not because I didn't care, but because I couldn't risk falling for fiction again. Some truths are too cruel to unlearn. And Lily? She'd learned hers. Biology doesn't earn you love. But betrayal? That stays. It settles into your voice, your posture, your memories. And every time she glanced in the mirror from then on, she saw it staring back. Not the man who raised her, but the absence he left behind. She left me with a post-it note and a reheated lasagna. That was it. No dramatic confrontation. No tears. Just her handwriting. You'll find someone who matches your rhythm someday. I need fireworks. And next to it, a casserole dish that still had the aluminum foil from the night before. That was 4 years ago. And now, I'm holding a hand-addressed wedding invitation with gold-embossed lettering that reads, "Naomi Carter and Eric Malden request the honor of your presence." My name's on the RSVP line, like she's inviting me to a book club instead of the ceremonial unveiling of her new life. She wants me to see her wearing white again, wants me to sit in the back pew and marvel at what she traded up to. What she doesn't know is this isn't her stage anymore. I filled out the reply card and checked gladly attending. No +1. Didn't need a distraction. See, Naomi always thought silence meant weakness, that walking away without slamming the door made me boring. But silence has gravity. It makes people lean in, try to fill it. She'll find that out soon enough. I booked a flight under my middle name, rented a car 2 towns over, even picked up a new pair of shoes, though I'll be damned if I break them in before the big day. She built the stage. I'll let her take center spotlight. And maybe before we go further, a small ask: if you've made it this far, 98% of people watching this channel haven't hit that subscribe button yet. We're building something raw, real, and razor sharp here, and your one click could help us finally crack that first 10,000. It's not just numbers. It's what fuels our team to keep sharpening these stories and going deeper. Thank you. Back to Naomi. It's funny, she always hated how I fold my shirts. Said I was obsessed with neatness. But she left the house in a hurry that day. Didn't notice the storage unit key tucked inside her old jewelry box, or the ledger I'd moved to the garage, or the backup drives labeled as 2012 taxes that weren't taxes at all. That key became the first step. The second? A name. Eric Malden. Young, ambitious, founder of some tech startup that sells empathy tracking software to HR departments. Oh, and charming. The kind of charming that makes your mother flirt and your best friend raise an eyebrow. They got engaged within 18 months. She posted it with the caption, "Took a leap. Fell into something real." I printed it, framed it, not out of heartbreak, but precision. I don't keep grudges. I catalog them. What Naomi didn't know, and likely still doesn't, is that her groom's father and I once stood across from each other in a federal courtroom. Different suits. Same silence. And I remember the way he looked down when the verdict came. That little twitch in his jaw. That moment of recognition, of being caught. Now he's walking his son down the aisle. I land 2 days before the wedding. Small town. Historic church. Brick and ivy. I drive past the venue once. Then again. No one notices. Naomi wouldn't expect me to show. She likely sent that invitation assuming I'd ignore it. Or maybe she hoped I'd come crawling, awash in regret. Either way, she miscalculated. I check into a motel, 2nd floor, no view. Pull the curtains tight. Iron my shirt. Lay out the sealed envelope I brought in my jacket's inner lining. A copy of the exact document her soon-to-be father-in-law never thought would resurface. Signed. Notarized. Forgotten by most. But not me. I sleep like a soldier on recon, shallow, ready, surgical. Morning arrives. I dress slow. No tie. Crisp cuffs. Pocket square that matches the exact shade of her wedding invitations. Let's call it performative closure beige. Then I drive. Park 3 blocks away. Walk the rest. Calm as a Sunday storm. They say revenge is best served cold. They're wrong. Revenge is best served silent, like a man you thought was history, quietly sitting in your audience, watching Act 2 of your delusion play out, with full knowledge that the final curtain belongs to him. Naomi didn't cry when she left. She smiled. That smug, satisfied little smile she used to wear after winning arguments she never really understood. She stood in the doorway wearing a silk blouse I'd never seen before, holding a Louis Vuitton suitcase that still had a gift tag on it. Hair curled. Lips done. Not for me. You're too safe, Thomas, she said, like she was diagnosing a mild allergy. I want passion, not spreadsheets. I remember staring at her shoes. 4-inch heels. She always said they hurt her arches. But I guess excitement makes a woman bulletproof. She didn't slam the door. Just clicked it shut like she was heading out to a spa weekend, not detonating a 17-year marriage. No affairs to confess. No yelling. Just an exit. She moved in with Eric before the coffee maker had time to cool. A startup guy, mid-30s, all teeth and charisma. I saw a video of him speaking at some tech conference once, gesturing like a magician, selling something intangible to people desperate to believe in disruption. He made a joke about old-school management styles. Got a standing ovation. Naomi must have been in the audience. Or maybe already in his hotel room. Hard to tell. I didn't fight. Didn't call. Didn't post a cryptic quote about growth or healing on Facebook. I just deleted her contact, set my calendar on fire, and made a different kind of to-do list. A quiet one. Because here's the thing Naomi never understood. I don't make scenes. I make systems. She thought she erased me, but she only archived me. And now? She's walking down a marble aisle in an overpriced dress, on the arm of a man who once spent 3 months trying to sue the federal government into silence. A man whose name still lingers in sealed court transcripts. A man who, in 2001, nearly lost everything because of a whistleblower who refused to be bought off. That whistleblower was me. Of course, Eric doesn't know that. Why would he? Men like that don't read history. They rewrite it with their dad's money and a PR team. But his father? Oh, he remembers. We shared more than a courtroom. We shared a moment. One where he realized I wasn't a cog in someone else's machine. I was the machine. And now he's going to watch his son say, I do, in front of the man who almost dismantled his empire. Fate's funny like that. The wedding venue is laughably grand. A restored cathedral in a town too small to justify marble lions at the gate. Naomi loves theatrics. I'm sure the guest list includes the Pilates friends who told her she was glowing during the separation. Probably some crypto brothers. Maybe even her sister, who once drunkenly told me I was the best thing that ever happened to Naomi. But God, you're boring. She wasn't wrong. I was boring. Until I wasn't. Until I pulled the pin. I arrive early. I always do. Efficiency is just controlled patience. I sit in the second to last pew. Perfect vantage. The stained glass casts amber light through the chapel, warm and biblical. Naomi probably thinks it flatters her complexion. The guests pour in like confetti. Champagne laughter. Handshakes with veiled envy. Perfume and ego. It's all exactly what she always wanted. Curated chaos that looks spontaneous. Then the doors open. She walks in like the star of a one-woman play, head high, smile calculated to hit every angle. The gown is over-designed. Sculpted to look effortless. Classic Naomi. When the whispers die down, she locks eyes with Eric, and I swear I see it, that flicker of triumph. As if this moment proves she was right to leave. And for the briefest second, I let her believe it. Until Eric's father turns. He's seated front row, flanked by attorneys dressed like groomsmen. When his eyes meet mine, the color drains from his face like someone flipped a breaker inside him. No one else notices, yet. But he does. And that's when the performance begins to unravel. Eric looked like the kind of man who thought his life was a screenplay. Button tucks, confident smile, that little head nod he gave to guests like he was the lead actor thanking extras. He stood tall at the altar, joking with the priest, soaking in the reverence that only comes when you believe you earned it. He hadn't. I arrived 37 minutes early. Sat in the second to last pew. Third seat from the aisle. Predictable, forgettable. I could have been a cousin from out of town. Or a florist's husband. I wore a charcoal suit, no tie. Pressed, but plain. Something about looking like you belong makes people not question why you're there. The church filled slowly. Laughter echoed off the vaulted ceilings, blending with organ music. Guests were dressed to be noticed. Naomi's crowd always was. Old colleagues from her PR firm whispered in cliques. Some man with slicked hair pointed at me, then shrugged when he realized he didn't know me. Perfect. The bridesmaids strutted in like they were auditioning for something. Then Naomi appeared. The designer gown she wore had that modern bridal arrogance. White, but smug about it. Sleeves sculpted, back exposed just enough to signal elegance and rebellion. She wasn't walking toward Eric. She was walking toward a victory. Her little, I told you so, in human form. I watched her smile as the crowd turned. That slow, confident glide down the aisle. The subtle tug of her veil by a flower girl dressed in glittered obedience. And somewhere between steps 9 and 10, she looked over the guests. Right past me. Didn't even flinch. Of course, she didn't recognize me. That version of me no longer exists. But the man in the front row? He noticed. Eric's father, Charles Malden, was sitting with perfect posture. He held the wedding program like it had stock tips printed on it. Next to him sat a woman I assumed was wife number 2 or possibly a very well-compensated assistant. Either way, she didn't matter. What mattered was the moment his eyes found mine. And froze. I saw the twitch. The way the corner of his mouth dropped half a millimeter. The subtle shake of his fingers as he tightened his grip on the program. As if holding it harder might hold back what was now charging at him from the past. He knew who I was. I watched the memory hit him like a shrapnel burst, courtroom lights, the scrape of a chair, My voice under oath. The young engineer who had destroyed the offshore pipeline that fed his first fortune. The man who stood up to his fleet of lawyers and said, "No deal." His hand dropped the program. He stood. Not quickly. Slowly. Deliberately. Like his body was trying to stall his mind. Eric didn't notice at first. He was too busy grinning, waving at someone in the fourth row. Oblivious. Naomi glanced over, brow furrowing, one hand reflexively adjusting her neckline. Whisper started. Someone leaned toward Charles, but he didn't answer. Just took a step toward the aisle. And I sat still. Back straight. No expression. Letting it build. Letting the fuse burn. Because the real tension? It doesn't come from chaos. It comes from silence that shouldn't be silent. And at that moment, every second felt like it was echoing. Eric's father turned and walked. Not out, but toward the altar. Straight to his son. You could practically hear the suction of air in the room when Charles leaned into Eric's ear and said something urgent. Not angry. Not loud. Just surgical. Eric's grin twitched. His brow furrowed. He blinked like a man trying to place a dream he didn't realize was a memory. Then he looked right at me. Our eyes met. And in that moment, I saw it. Uncertainty. Like a man who spent his whole life assuming the world was a stage built for him. Suddenly realizing he doesn't know the script. Eric turned back to his father, whispered something. Charles shook his head. Sharp. Absolute. Then pointed at me with two fingers, fast and discreet. Like a field commander trying not to spook the troops. Naomi, halfway up the aisle now, stopped walking. What is it? She called out, half laughing, trying to keep the mood light. What's going on? No one answered. The organist hesitated, then stopped playing altogether. Guests turned like wheat in a breeze, one by one, toward the back of the room. Toward me, the anonymous man in the cheap pew. The shadow no one invited, but who RSVP'd anyway. Naomi's voice sharpened. Eric. He didn't answer her. The priest looked unsure whether to smile or bless someone. Then, in one clean motion, Eric handed his boutonniere to the nearest groomsman, stepped off the altar, and walked down the aisle. Toward me. Shoes echoing on polished wood. Eyes locked. You could feel it in the walls. Tension, confusion, ego bruising itself on silence. The bridesmaids stiffened like mannequins. Naomi stood frozen, mouth slightly open, bouquet limp. Her left heel shifted, reflexive, as if she was deciding whether to charge forward or bolt out the back. Eric stopped 3 feet from me. You, he said. Not quite a question. Not yet a statement. Yes. I answered calmly. He looked back at his father, then at me. Do we know each other? I tilted my head. Just a little. Not yet. But we've been circling the same fire. He flinched. Like something about the wording struck a nerve. What is this? What the hell are you doing here? He asked. I reached inside my suit coat and pulled out the envelope. Cream, sealed with wax, the old-fashioned way. This, I said, offering it, is for your father's eyes only. Read it. Privately. Then decide if you want to keep playing husband today. Eric didn't move. But Charles did. He stepped forward fast, snatched the envelope before Eric's fingers could touch it. Didn't say a word. Just stared at me like a man who saw a ghost he thought he'd buried under concrete. I said nothing. He opened it right there. No backroom. No discretion. Just tore the seal and read. His face drained. Pupils shrank. A vein pulsed on his forehead like a countdown. When he was done, he handed the papers to Eric. Slowly, reverently, like passing a detonator. Eric read in silence. Then he looked up, looked at Naomi, who still hadn't moved, still in that frozen statuesque pose she practiced for every wedding photo fantasy she ever had. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't cry. He just said, clearly enough for everyone in the church to hear, "You need to sit down." And the church, once again, went dead silent. Eric was shaking. Not visibly. Not dramatically. Just that subtle twitch men get when they realize the room they thought they controlled is suddenly wired with traps, and they're standing on all of them. He stared at me like a man trying to remember a stranger from a bad dream. "Do I know you?" he asked, voice firm, but his body betrayed him. Hands clenched. Shoulders pulled back just a little too far, like he was trying to stay upright on a boat that had just tilted hard left. I stood slowly, gave him the full view. "No," I said, "but your father does." Then I held out the envelope again. Same wax seal, same slow gravity. You'll want to open this privately. Then decide if today's still your day. Eric glanced at his father, who was already storming forward. Charles snatched the envelope without a word, like it might detonate if I held it a second longer. His expression? Familiar. That same corporate mask he wore in court 2 decades ago, chiseled calm, backed by panic. Eric hesitated. What is this? Charles didn't answer, just grabbed his son's arm and pulled him toward a small chapel room off the main hall. No words. No questions. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A woman coughed into her elbow. One of the groomsmen pulled out his phone, checked it, then thought better of it. The priest, poor bastard, stood like someone had just handed him a live grenade wrapped in tulle. Naomi started moving. He's not going in there without me, she said, trying to push forward. But the maid of honor, a redhead with a backbone I hadn't expected, blocked her path. Eric said privately, she said, tight-lipped. Naomi glared at her. Are you serious? I'm serious, the girl snapped. He asked. Naomi stood frozen in the center aisle, hands trembling slightly now, bouquet held like a weapon with nowhere to aim. Her lips moved, but no words came. Just confusion, dread, and that hint of anger she used to flash at me when I overthought things. 10 minutes passed like molasses. Every tick of the old church clock sounded like a countdown. And then the door opened. Eric stepped out first. His face looked wrong, colorless, hollow, like he'd just learned gravity wasn't real. Behind him, Charles followed, rubbing the bridge of his nose like he'd aged a decade in the span of a file folder. Eric didn't walk back to the altar. He didn't look at the priest. He walked straight to Naomi, slow and certain. The room waited. Naomi tried to smile. Everything okay? Eric stared at her, hard, and then in a voice quieter than anyone expected, but sharp enough to cut through every pew, he said, You need to sit down. Gasps rippled. Naomi blinked. What? Eric looked away. He turned toward the guests, then toward the altar, and finally toward me, still standing in the back pew, silent as a headstone. And in that instant, he understood. Not the full weight. Not yet. But he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't a wedding anymore. It was a reckoning. The envelope wasn't thick, but it was dense. Every page in it had been touched by time, by lawyers, by silence. You could smell the decade on it. Inside, court documents dated 1996. Case ID. Sealed. Plaintiff. United States Government. Defendant. Arcicet Holdings, LLC. Nature of offense. Securities fraud. Penalties. $4.2 million. Primary witness. Thomas B. Merrill. Role. Junior Systems Engineer. Internal Analyst. Testimony. Damning. Back then, I was just a 29-year-old with a bad haircut and a functional conscience. I'd flagged an internal ledger that didn't make sense, double-stacked vendor IDs, untraceable wire transfers, payout chains with no service logs. Brought it to my manager. He told me to let it go. I didn't. Instead, I escalated. And when it reached the partner level, that's when the walls started shifting. Suddenly, project deadlines disappeared, meetings were canceled, and I was being offered consulting work in Florida if I kept my mouth shut. I declined. Next came the subpoenas, the meetings in rented conference rooms, the quiet nods from government suits who never wore ties. I testified. And across from me, one row back from the defense team, sat Charles Malden, not named in the suit. Not directly, just present, always present. One of those men who managed to exist in every room without ever signing anything. A silent partner, as they called it. No emails, no fingerprints. But everyone knew. I watched his empire shrink by millions that year, but not collapse. Because Charles did what people like him always do. He liquidated fast, rerouted assets, and distanced himself. Let the fall guy burn. Then took the remainder and reinvested it into something smaller. Leaner. Untraceable. Something that later became Malden Metrics, his son Eric's beloved tech company. The one he brags about founding in a garage, never mentioning that the garage came with a $300,000 wire transfer 2 months before. That's what was in the envelope. Not just the transcripts or the federal documents or the clipped newspaper articles, but the confidential settlement agreement. The one that required silence in exchange for immunity. The one that Charles thought had been buried under 20 years of handshakes and shell corporations. The one with his name, his signature. The one that voids any legitimate claim to clean capital used in the founding of Malden Metrics. See, the prenup Naomi made Eric sign. So smug, so ironclad, it had a clause. One she probably didn't even understand, tucked away in the boilerplate language near the end. Any marital assets found to be materially linked to undisclosed, illegal, or fraudulent income sources, direct or indirect, shall be considered ineligible for community distribution in the event of separation. Translation: if the money that built Eric's world came from poisoned roots, Naomi gets nothing. And now, the roots are showing. Because my envelope didn't just contain the past. It contained the blueprint of the present and the collapse of their future. Eric read every page. And with each paragraph, the blood drained from his face. The company he loved was a lie. The money he lived on was compromised. The man who raised him was a criminal in Armani. And the woman standing in a designer dress, waiting for him to say, "I do," never once asked where any of it came from. She didn't want to know. She wanted excitement. And now she was about to get it, served in cold, legal language. Sealed in wax. Hand-delivered by the man she left in silence. Me. Naomi always prided herself on being the smartest person in the room, especially when it came to money. The prenup? That was her masterpiece. She brought it up 6 weeks into her relationship with Eric. Said it was just a formality, but made sure her friends knew she'd secured her future with a single document. The tone she used was always the same, sweet on the surface, but underneath, a thin layer of contempt. The kind of tone you use when you think you're smarter than the man sleeping next to you. Eric didn't even flinch when she asked him to sign. He was in love, infatuated, maybe just drunk on the fact that someone like Naomi, sharp, older, elegant, wanted him. He signed it before brunch. What Naomi didn't know, I'd already read it. Because the lawyer she used, Glenn Holbrook, wasn't just a trusted estate professional in Westwood. He was also a man I once shared a windowless war room with during the Arsaset fallout. We'd reviewed hundreds of pages of ledger sheets together. Glenn knew the smell of dirty money before it even hit the paper. He owed me a favor. So when Naomi contacted him, no doubt bragging that her boring ex was probably still clipping coupons, I made a call. And Glenn did something Naomi would never imagine a lawyer doing. He helped me strengthen her prenup against her. See, Naomi's draft was decent. Solid on property rights. Strong on alimony structure. But Glenn slid in a subtle, devastating clause under the section labeled Asset Origin and Disclosure. Legalese so dry, most people wouldn't give it a second look. It read, in the event that any assets, business holdings, or marital contributions are discovered to originate, directly or indirectly, from undisclosed, fraudulent, or criminal sources, the party uninformed of said origin shall retain full claim over separate holdings, and all community property designation shall be nullified. To Naomi, it sounded like protection from Eric. To Glenn and me, it was a detonator. Because now that the court records had resurfaced, tying the original seed capital of Malden Metrics to a fraud settlement, every dollar Eric brought into the marriage became suspect. Every joint purchase, every future investment, every luxury Naomi had mentally claimed as hers, gone. And because she had insisted on the prenup, she couldn't argue coercion, ignorance, or unfair negotiation. She built the vault. We just changed the lock. I watched her that day, standing there, trying to keep her composure as Eric whispered something sharp in her ear. Her face twitched, just a fraction. Eyes narrowed. Lips parted. She turned to Charles, like maybe he could salvage it. But Charles was already defeated. His empire exposed. His son poisoned by the truth. His silence, once bought and buried, now just debris. Naomi stepped back. This is ridiculous, she said, loud enough for the first 2 pews to hear. It doesn't even matter. We're married in spirit. That's what counts. But even her voice cracked when she said it. Eric just looked at her. You used to ask me what made me different, he said. It was always the money. The energy. The edge, right? Naomi nodded, careful now. Like a fox realizing the trap was hers. He pointed at the envelope still lying on the nearby chair. Well, he said, that's what the edge looks like when it comes to. Naomi's shoulders dropped. For the first time, she looked small in that dress. Not radiant. Not victorious. Just cornered. Because all this time, she thought she was dancing through someone else's story. She didn't realize I was the one writing the epilogue. The silence was the kind that grows teeth. Eric stood at the altar, shoulders tight, hands trembling just enough to betray him. He looked out at the guests, friends, colleagues, influencers, investors, people he'd invited to witness the apex of his life. But now they looked back at him like spectators at a crime scene. He cleared his throat. The priest shifted uneasily. "Shall we continue?" "No," Eric said, steady now. "We're not getting married today." The words sliced through the room like a guillotine. Naomi gasped. A real one. Not the performative kind she practiced in mirrors or used during boardroom dramatics. This one came from her ribs. A sharp, involuntary exhale of disbelief. "What?" she asked, stepping forward. "Eric, no, whatever this is, we can fix it." He held up a hand. She stopped mid-step. The crowd murmured. One of Naomi's friends let out a little shriek giggle before realizing no one else was laughing. A groomsman coughed. The organist froze mid-chord. And I didn't say a word. Didn't blink. Didn't flinch. Just stood and turned. Walked calmly down the aisle as if the ceremony was over. Because it was. Naomi's voice chased me. "Thomas, what the hell did you do?" But she didn't follow. She couldn't. Not in those heels. Not with that pride dragging behind her like a train. When I reached the back doors, I paused only once, to take one last look at the altar where she had once built her fantasy, brick by delusion-filled brick. She had designed this whole production to be a final middle finger to our past. A performance of conquest. Victory lap and ivory silk. Instead, it collapsed in silence. As I stepped outside, cool air greeted me like an accomplice. Then came the footsteps behind me. I didn't turn. I already knew. Charles Malden stood a few feet back, hands deep in his coat pockets, the envelope still clutched under one arm like a verdict. "You never forgot," he said. His voice wasn't mocking. Not angry. Just tired. That kind of tired men get when they realize the past doesn't fade, it calculates. I turned to him. "No," I replied. "But I forgave. That's why I came." He looked at me, eyes wet but unbroken. To destroy them? I shook my head. To close the book. And in truth, that's exactly what this was. Not revenge. Not rage. I didn't come to gloat or shout or pull some cheap dramatic stunt. I came to turn the last page on a story that began the moment Naomi told me I was too safe. She mistook quiet for weak. Mistook kindness for dullness. She thought the world belonged to people who shouted loudest, moved fastest, sparkled brightest. But power? Power is knowing exactly when to speak. And when to vanish. So I left. Didn't look back. Didn't wait for applause. Just walked away as the church doors groaned shut behind me, sealing the wreckage inside. It wasn't my mess to clean anymore. It never really was. By Monday morning, Naomi's wedding had become a cautionary tale wrapped in designer lace. The first article appeared in a local lifestyle blog. Runaway groom at Whispering Pines. The wedding that wasn't. No names at first. Just speculation, blurry photos, and a few too eager quotes from anonymous guests close to the couple. But within 48 hours, the story metastasized. An investor pulled out of Eric's next funding round. A luxury vendor posted a now-deleted TikTok rant. Some people think they can order $24,000 worth of floral chandeliers and vanish. Girl, we have receipts. That one got 500,000 views before breakfast. Naomi's Instagram, formerly a curated grid of brunch plates, skincare rituals, and cryptic affirmations, went dark. She'd spent the last year building a brand around her new life. A lifestyle coach for women who don't settle. She used to end her captions with #upgraded. Now people were commenting, "You got downgraded, sweetheart." Eric disappeared from the public eye. Word spread, quietly at first, that he'd fired his father as financial advisor and board consultant. The family trust that had once served as the backbone of Malden Metrics was being independently reviewed. Charles's name stopped appearing in press releases. And Naomi? She had already quit her job 6 months earlier. She liked to call herself retired. Even though she was 41 and still carried student debt, she never mentioned to Eric. Said she was focused on curating their home, which really meant draining a joint account on monogrammed wine glasses and imported stone bathtubs. She'd moved out of her apartment before the wedding, let her lease expire, told her landlord she wouldn't need a backup plan. Now she was couch surfing with a friend from Pilates, begging to borrow her Amex, just until the venue refund clears. Except the venue didn't refund. They sued. Breach of contract. Non-payment of deposits. Emotional damages for the trauma inflicted on staff. And Naomi, despite all her airs, was not on the contract. Eric was. And Eric wasn't answering her calls anymore. Neither was Charles. She tried spinning it. It was mutual. We realized we were better off as friends. The timing just wasn't right. But the city's social circle has a memory like a shark, only moving forward, but never forgetting what it's already bitten. By Friday, she caved. She sent me a message. Just one line. No emojis. No punctuation. What did I ever do to you to deserve this? I stared at it. The gall. The gall to pretend she didn't know. That leaving me for a flashier man and flaunting it like a trophy wasn't enough. That mocking the life we built, our quiet dinners, our spreadsheets, our Sunday routines, wasn't enough. That inviting me to her wedding, not as closure, but as audience to her level up, wasn't enough. She knew. Of course she did. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. Silence was what started all this. And silence would be what finished it. It was raining the last time she saw me. Not the cinematic kind. No thunder. No sweeping soundtrack. Just a steady drizzle soaking the sidewalks and softening the skyline. The kind of rain that makes people quieter, more careful. The kind of day where apologies feel easier, even when they're decades late. I was at the library cafe. Tuesdays were quiet there, old hardwood tables, overpriced espresso, and the low hum of pages turning. I liked it because no one asked questions. You could sit with your thoughts and no one would interrupt them. Until she did. Thomas. Her voice was small. Not the Naomi I remembered. Not the woman who once leaned over a balcony at our friend's engagement party and whispered that I wasn't built for greatness. This version stood in flat shoes and a rain-specked coat she probably never planned to be seen in. She sat down before I invited her. I didn't flinch. Just closed the book in front of me and looked up. Her eyes were glassy. Not from the rain. I really did love you once, she said, fingers tightening around her purse like it might keep her anchored. I sipped my coffee. It had gone cold. You loved the version of me you didn't understand, I said. She blinked. What does that mean? It means you fell in love with a mirror. And when I didn't reflect what you wanted anymore, you smashed it. Called the pieces growth. She said nothing. I was never the problem, I added. You were just never patient enough to see the design. Naomi's lips parted, but no words came out. She looked tired. The kind of tired that no serum or spin class fixes. The kind of tired that comes from realizing you bet your entire future on a facade and lost. I wasn't trying to hurt you back then, she said quietly. Doesn't mean you didn't, I replied. She looked down, tried to smile, but it came out warped. You know. I thought if I built the perfect life, it would prove something. To you. To everyone. It did, I said. Just not what you think. I stood. Left my half-finished coffee on the table. She didn't stop me. Didn't plead. Just sat there as I turned and walked toward the door. As I passed the window, I caught her reflection. Still. Small. Watching me go like the end of a movie she thought would turn out differently. She never saw me again. Because I didn't need to yell. Didn't need to rage or ruin or revenge. She ended my story once, with a smirk and a suitcase. I ended hers with silence. I was stirring the ashes with the poker when she said it. Casually, like she was ordering dessert. I only married you because he left me first. The sentence just hovered. No build-up. No warning. No hesitation. Just that. Like a blade pressed flat against your throat. Cold, sharp, and meant to make you freeze. The sound of it didn't echo. It didn't need to. It buried itself directly in the marrow. She didn't even turn to look at me. Her eyes were locked on the dying flames, sipping her wine like it was just another Tuesday. Legs crossed, nails freshly done. That robe she only wore when she felt untouchably superior draped over her shoulder. That's when I knew. She wasn't just saying it to hurt me. She was finally telling her truth. I didn't ask who he was. I already knew. There are two kinds of pain in a marriage. The kind that explodes and the kind that calcifies. Ours had been rotting quietly. Dinners eaten in silence. Phone screens lit up after midnight. Her laughter changing pitch depending on who was texting. You don't need a detective to tell you what you can feel every time the mattress shifts a little farther apart. I didn't throw the poker. I didn't yell. I didn't even blink. Instead, I stood slowly, letting the poker clink back into the brass holder. She barely noticed. Or maybe she was testing if I would flinch. Either way, she got her answer. My feet moved on their own, muscle memory. Back down the hallway, past the bedroom we hadn't really shared in months, into the study. The room she rarely entered, except to borrow a pen or accidentally move things around so I'd waste time putting them back. Petty little dominations. I let her have those. I needed her to. The bottom drawer of the old oak desk stuck a little. Humidity always did that. I reached in, felt around under the file folders and spare checks, and pressed the hidden latch I'd built into the frame 3 years ago. It clicked. Smooth, satisfying. The compartment slid open with the soft glide of precision engineering. Inside, a plain gray folder. One word handwritten on the front in a style only my generation still uses cursively. Begin. I stood there for a moment, hand resting on it. Funny, I always imagined I'd be more emotional opening this thing. But instead, I felt calm. Like watching dominoes finally fall the way you set them up months ago. A quiet click, click, click toward inevitability. I opened the folder and began leafing through it again, even though I knew every page by heart. Printed screenshots from a dummy email account I'd set up under a different name. Receipts. Time-stamped hotel invoices. 2 rooms booked in her name and Paul's. Yes, Paul. The same man from her college scrapbook. The one she swore was a phase. The one whose name she couldn't even say without her voice getting lighter. There was more. A grainy photo of them at the airport in Charlotte, 1 week before our anniversary last year. He was holding her hand. She was smiling. It wasn't just a fling. It was a dream she thought she could revive. A yellow post, it stuck to one of the pages read, "He'll leave her this time. I just need to stall Harold." She'd written that. Not in a journal. In an actual message. She didn't even bother encrypting it. That's how invincible she felt. The bottom of the folder held the recent additions. The paternity test for Evan, our son, or so I was told. My lawyer said I wasn't legally obligated to include it in any future proceedings. But I kept it anyway. Not because I didn't love Evan, but because I needed to know what was real. Turns out, about half of our marriage wasn't. I pulled out a note card and scribbled a line in ink. My hand steady, letters neat. Read everything. Then decide who you are without lies. I placed it on top of the files and closed the folder. Snapped the elastic band shut. The folder was heavier now, not from paper, but from purpose. When I returned to the living room, she was still sipping wine, still looking at the fireplace like she hadn't just detonated 2 decades of trust in one whisper. She glanced at me, bored. Forget something? I said nothing. Just walked past her, the folder tucked under my arm like it was nothing more than bills to pay. I set it on the kitchen island, right where she left her phone every night while texting him from the bathroom. Then I turned back to her. No more guessing, I said. You'll want to start with page 5. And I left her there, in that robe, with that wine, watching a fire that had finally gone cold. Sleep was never an option. After she dropped that little truth grenade and retreated to the bedroom like she'd just mentioned we were out of milk, I didn't even sit down. I just paced. Not in that panicked, arms flailing kind of way, but like a man counting steps in a prison he'd built himself. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Megan had always insisted on modern silence. No ticking clocks, no humming appliances. It made the emptiness louder. So I went back to the study and did what I'd rehearsed in my head more times than I could admit. I laid the folder flat on the desk, clicked on the brass lamp, her father's, which she said made the room look less pathetic, and started flipping through the pages. Not to remind myself. To make sure I hadn't missed a single crack. I hadn't. The first page was a credit card statement. A $612 charge at the Ritz-Carlton in Denver. During a week, she told me she was at a women's leadership retreat in Scottsdale. I remember packing her suitcase for that trip. I even ironed her favorite white blouse. She texted me a photo from a fake seminar. Turned out to be stock footage from a corporate site in Toronto. Page 2 was a screenshot of a confirmation email. 2 round-trip tickets booked under her maiden name and his Paul Brennan. She used the shadow Gmail account I had flagged 6 months ago. It was named after our dead dog. Subtle. She used that email for everything. For the hotel invoices, the dinner reservations, the Uber receipts. There was even a forwarded Amazon wishlist, mostly men's clothing, oddly specific sizes. He wasn't even subtle about it. "Thanks, babe. These'll fit perfect." I printed it, highlighted that line in yellow. Then came the message. The real prize. It was dated 7 months back. The subject line was blank, but the body said, "He'll leave her this time. I just need to stall Harold. I'll say he's just a friend. He'll buy it. He always does." No punctuation. Just that. Raw, direct, dismissive. It wasn't a betrayal. It was a strategy. Roger helped me get most of this. Roger, the same guy who taught me how to fly fish in Montana and drink bourbon without wincing. Ex-cop. Ex-PI. Ex-husband to a woman who did something similar, though less poetic in her execution. I called him one afternoon last year, just to talk. He listened for 10 minutes, then asked, "Want truth or comfort?" I said, "Truth." 3 weeks later, he had 3 thumb drives and a dry smile. "You married a Hallmark card with a butcher's knife behind her back." He didn't say it to be cruel. He said it because I needed to stop seeing her through the gauze of memory, through the lens of who she was when we met, when she smiled like she meant it, when she used to slip handwritten notes in my suitcase. I held on to those notes for years. Now they felt like forged currency. One of the most damning things wasn't even a document. It was a photo Roger had taken outside a bookstore in Portland. Megan and Paul, standing under a red awning, mid-laugh, her head on his shoulder. He was holding a small paper bag with what looked like a poetry collection. She hated poetry. Or maybe she just hated reading it with me. There were details, little ones, that shredded any last fiber of doubt. A receipt from a spa day she told me was a girl's outing, but was paid for by Paul's business card. A pair of hotel key cards she thought she lost in her purse, mailed anonymously to her home in an unmarked envelope. That had been Roger too, his idea of a soft prod. I put everything in order. Chronologically. Neatly. Like I used to assemble blueprint packets when I ran site design. It wasn't just documentation, it was architecture. The anatomy of a lie. At the back of the folder, I added the newest insert, a copy of a paternity test. I didn't ask for it. Roger did. Without telling me. Evan's results came back inconclusive. A probability match with Paul's archived blood sample. 84%. That was enough to keep me up, if I'd still been capable of losing sleep. But I didn't feel rage. Not anymore. Just resolve. I grabbed one of my old note cards, thick cardstock, the kind I used to sketch ideas on, and wrote in clean block letters. "Read everything. Then decide who you are without lies." I slid it on top, aligned it perfectly, and closed the folder. My hand lingered on the cover. Begin. I had chosen that word carefully. Not revenge. Not proof. Just begin. Because ending this marriage wasn't the final chapter. It was the start of something far more interesting. She was barefoot when she came into the kitchen that morning, like nothing had happened. Hair wrapped in that silk scarf she always wore on Sundays. Mug in hand, yawning as if the night before had ended with a lullaby and not a confession that torched the last 24 years of my life. The folder was right where I left it. Kitchen island. Centered. Angled toward her chair, like a placemat for the apocalypse. She didn't notice it at first. Too busy making her almond milk latte, humming that same Carole King tune she plays when she wants to seem warm. That song used to mean something to me. Now it sounded like a con. Then her eyes flicked to the folder. She paused mid-stir. The hum stopped. "What's this?" She tried to sound casual, almost curious. But there was a note of something in her voice, something tight. She knew it was for her. She just didn't know what flavor of hell it contained. I didn't answer. I just nodded toward it and leaned against the sink, arms folded. She set her mug down and opened the folder like someone defusing a bomb. The first page, credit card statements. Flight records. She blinked. Flipped to the next. A printed thread of emails between her and Paul. Her mouth opened slightly. No words yet. Just air. Then came the photos. The one of her and Paul under the red awning. The one outside the hotel in Dallas. The spa confirmation. His name on the payment line. By the time she got to the post-it note, "He'll leave her this time. I just need to stall Harold." She had stopped sipping her coffee. Still, she tried. It wasn't physical, she said, voice suddenly smaller. It was just emotional support. You've been so distant lately." I raised an eyebrow. Still silent. She turned a page. Her hand froze. It was the paternity test. Her eyes scanned the paper. Then she closed the folder abruptly, as if doing so could reverse the content. As if sealing it shut would keep the consequences in. "You're overreacting," she said sharply, a tremor in her voice now. "You're being paranoid. This isn't what it looks like." That's always the line, isn't it? This isn't what it looks like. Like there's a noble explanation for two people booking adjacent suites under assumed names while your husband thinks you're at a leadership retreat. I tilted my head slightly, still waiting. Her fingers went back to the folder, slower now. The pages were thinner near the back, just a few more. And then she saw it. The letter. On my lawyer's stationery. Dated 3 days ago. Signed. Notarized. Outlining asset division, separation of accounts, property handling. The trigger clause from the prenup. She had forgotten it even existed, buried in the early years when love still looked like certainty. Her eyes darted to the no card at the end. "Read everything. Then decide who you are without lies." She whispered, "You're not serious." I finally spoke. "I'm not interested in a debate, Megan. I've spent 24 years learning your patterns. I know exactly what comes next. The tears, the sex, the temporary tenderness, and then another girl's trip, where Paul's just a friend with history. I just skipped the parts I've already lived through." She stood there, stunned. You had this ready." I nodded once. "Months." Her face fell. The mask cracked. And that's when I saw it, not regret, not shame. Panic. Because she realized the performance window had closed. There was no audience left to manipulate. No delay tactic that could work. "You've talked to a lawyer?" she asked, voice brittle. "No," I said. "I hired one. You'll find the number highlighted on page 6. Yours is still listed as a contact, but that'll be corrected shortly." She looked at me like she didn't recognize the man standing across from her. Like I had changed overnight. But I hadn't changed. I just stopped pretending. The next day, Megan made eggs. She never made eggs. They were on the table before I even sat down. Perfectly scrambled, dusted with paprika, toast on the side, buttered just the way I like it. No talking, no snide remarks about cholesterol. Just breakfast. Served with that awkward, too wide smile she used to weaponize back when she wanted me to co-sign on her sister's condo loan. I didn't touch the plate. "You need to eat," she said softly. I just looked at her. No blink. No comment. She wilted slightly, but recovered. "We should talk. I think we've both let things drift too far." Oh, so now we drifted. Not her and Paul. We. That evening, Sinatra played through the house speakers. I was in the living room reading an old issue of Popular Mechanics when our song came on. Except it wasn't our song. It was the one she danced to with Paul at that college reunion in '03, the one she swore meant nothing, even after I found the photo stuff between cookbook pages. She appeared in the doorway, holding a bottle of the wine we'd saved for a special occasion. She poured 2 glasses. "We should talk," she repeated, eyes glistening. I miss us." I didn't say a word. She placed the glass on the end table and walked out. 10 minutes later, the song changed to something slower, more pleading. By the end of the week, she'd accidentally left a few old Polaroids on my workbench, shots from our early road trips. Her with her feet on the dashboard, grinning in the sun. Me holding a map, looking lost. Classic nostalgia trap. I flipped through them in silence. She stood behind me, arms folded tightly. "This wasn't all fake," she said, trying to sound wounded. Still no answer. Instead, I pulled open a drawer on my workbench. Inside, a black leather notebook. I flipped to a page labeled, "Expected Reactions." Underneath, "Guilt Bait Breakfast." Heavy check mark. "Emotional music." Heavy check mark. "Weaponized nostalgia." Heavy check mark. "Let's talk X2." Heavy check mark. "Imply mutual blame." Heavy check mark. "Deny physicality." Pending. I checked the 3rd box. She saw the list. Her eyes narrowed. "What the hell is that?" I closed the book. "Documentation." She scoffed, trying to summon indignation. "You're treating this like some kind of experiment." "No," I said finally. "An autopsy." She blinked. Later that night, I caught her on the phone in the guest bedroom, whispering frantically. My hearing's not what it used to be, but Paul's name came up twice. The second time she said, "Please just call me back, okay? I need to know." He didn't. I know because I checked the call log on the shared account. She called him 6 times over 3 days. Not a single return call. When I walked into the kitchen the next morning, she was wearing the same cardigan from our anniversary dinner last year. A subtle move. A final play at, remember who we were. She poured coffee. You don't have to do this, Harold. I sipped mine and said nothing. She placed her hand on mine. This isn't you. I nodded. That's right. Then I gently pulled my hand away, stood up, and walked out to the garage. That evening, she knocked on the side door of my workshop. That was new. She hadn't come near my space in months. Said it smelled like sawdust and regret. She stepped inside, eyes darting around like she was in foreign territory. She held a small box. Inside were our old postcards. Notes we wrote from vacations. The one from Yosemite, where we got lost. The one from Key West, where she got sunburned and refused to admit it. I kept them, she said. I nodded. Harold, for God's sake, this wasn't all fake. I didn't argue. I didn't even look up. Just opened the notebook again and checked off the 4th box. She watched me, realization blooming on her face like bruises. Not pain. Not yet. But fear? That had started to bloom. 3 mornings later, I heard her phone buzz in the bathroom. She always left it on the sink when she showered, too paranoid about water damage, not paranoid enough about secrets. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in over a decade, but I recognized it instantly, Paul Brennan. I picked it up, let it ring once, twice. Then I slid my thumb across the screen and said nothing. There was silence on the other end, long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. Then a dry voice broke through. I'm guessing this isn't Megan. Still, I didn't speak. He chuckled. Low. Bitter. I figured. Listen. I told her this would ruin your life. Guess she didn't care. He didn't sound angry. Not even defensive. Just tired. Like a man realizing he just scorched his own lawn. I'm not calling to fix anything, he continued. I blocked her 2 days ago. She's been blowing up my number like I'm Santa with a time machine. A pause. You didn't deserve this. But I guess that's the price of marrying someone who never shut the last door. Click. I let the line go dead and saved the voicemail to my secure cloud drive. Labeled it Paul, closure. The timing was ironic. Megan had spent the past 2 days slathering the house in fake peace. She baked banana bread, her old, I'm safe and wholesome move. She even lit that sandalwood candle she once called cringy because she knew I liked it. It was all camouflage. And camouflage works best when your target's tired. I wasn't tired. I opened my laptop, logged into our joint account, and methodically began transferring funds. Not recklessly. Not in a way that would trigger alerts. Just enough, at once, to make a clean divide. The rest would be caught in the settlement, which would be entirely on my terms. I had structured this prenup 12 years ago, after my second major promotion. At the time, Megan had said, "What, don't you trust me?" with that signature half-laugh she used to deflect anything serious. I responded with, "Of course I do. But I also trust mathematics." Every year since, I'd had it reviewed and updated. Quietly. While she was busy painting the kitchen or flirting with realtors or texting under the table at dinner. It had clauses. Safeguards. Triggers based on infidelity, emotional abandonment, and asset protection. And it named everything. The house. The vehicles. The retirement account she never bothered to read statements for. The vacation property in Traverse City she thought was jointly owned but wasn't. Even the damn boat she joked about selling every 4th of July, that too. She was listed as a secondary beneficiary on almost everything, not a co-owner. I changed the passwords to my main banking app. Killed access to the brokerage account with a single phone call and 2-factor authentication. The estate attorney I'd retained last year, a sharp woman named Denise, had prepped all the forms. All I had to do now was sign the digital packet, and Megan's access to my future would become ceremonial at best. I left the house that afternoon for a quiet walk through the old orchard path behind the property. I didn't need to go. I just wanted to give the illusion of routine. When I came back, she was sitting on the porch steps, her face lit with hope. "I made reservations at your favorite place," she said. 7 o'clock. Just us. I smiled politely. "That's kind of you," I replied. I walked past her and stepped inside. She didn't see the small flash drive in my palm. The one with her confession, Paul's voicemail, and a PDF of the prenup, all organized, time-stamped, and backed up in 3 separate cloud vaults. She thought we were headed to dinner. I was headed to deliver this to my lawyer. In person. And for the first time in weeks, I felt weightless. It started with the tears. Big, slow, theatrical ones. Not the shaking kind that come from the gut, but the controlled variety Megan had always reserved for delicate manipulations. She sat at the edge of our bed, knees pressed together, arms wrapped around herself like a child in a play. "I'm not okay," she said, voice trembling on cue. "I'm depressed, Harold. I haven't slept in days. You're abandoning me at my lowest." She looked up, waiting for a flicker of pity. I gave her a silence so still it echoed. She tried again. "You don't know what it's like to feel unwanted." That one almost made me laugh. But I didn't. I just watched her like she was reciting lines from a bad community theater script. Predictable beats. Predictable climax. The next day, she upped the stakes. "I want you to come with me," she said over coffee. "To therapy." "Your therapy?" I asked, already knowing the answer. She nodded slowly. "Dr. Layton thinks it would help if we process things together." I let the suggestion hang in the air. Let her believe I was considering it. The trap was simple: guilt by proximity. If she could drag me into a room and frame her breakdown as the result of my coldness, she could muddy the water, turn betrayal into mutual failure, make herself the struggling victim. I agreed. We met at a small beige office off Route 14, nestled between a dental clinic and a yoga studio. Inside, the place smelled like peppermint and laminate. Neutral couches, sound machine in the corner. The kind of room designed to make people cry on cue. Dr. Layton, a woman in her mid-50s with soft glasses and a voice like NPR at half volume, greeted us with warm palms and concerned eyes. Megan clung to her like a child at drop-off. "She's been telling me about the breakdown in communication," Dr. Layton began. "About how unsupported she feels. Would you be willing to share your experience?" I smiled faintly and reached into my leather briefcase. "Actually," I said, "I brought something." Megan's face stiffened. I slid a small folder across the table. Inside, printouts of Dr. Layton's own notes, secured years ago when Megan had insisted I attend 3 marriage maintenance sessions with her. I had kept them, digitized, archived, printed, just in case. I opened to one in particular, dated June 14th, 5 years ago. I read aloud, slowly. Megan expresses ongoing emotional attachment to a former partner from college. States she feels she may have married Harold out of fear of being alone. I slid it toward Dr. Layton. "You underlined that part yourself." Dr. Layton took the sheet, adjusted her glasses. "Read it." Megan turned the color of brick. "This is out of context," she snapped. Dr. Layton looked up, lips pressed. "Megan, you did bring this up, more than once." The room went quiet. The white noise machine filled the space like a soft mockery. "I don't think I can continue in this setting," Megan said, standing abruptly. "This isn't fair." I stood too, adjusted my coat, gave Dr. Layton a respectful nod. Then I turned to Megan. Our eyes met. I didn't say a word. And then I walked out, leaving the scent of peppermint and exposed memory behind me. The invitation had been sitting on the console table for weeks. Cream cardstock, gold embossed lettering, annual autumn gala, Hawthorne Country Club. Megan loved that event. The chandeliers, the wine list, the flattering lighting in the powder room. It was her version of Christmas, except the ornaments were other people's marriages, polished for display. She assumed we'd be attending together, as always. That morning, she tried to smooth things over with croissants and passive aggression. "I picked up your suit from the dry cleaner," she said, placing the hanger on the doorknob like a truce flag. "You should wear the navy one. It matches my dress." I nodded. "Thanks." She smiled, believing that meant yes. At 6:47 p.m., I pulled out of the driveway alone. I wore the charcoal suit instead. When I arrived, the valet recognized me and smiled with that forced familiarity rich people practice on each other. Inside, the dining hall was a blur of laughter, champagne flutes, and low orchestral music. The kind of night where everyone pretends they're not one mortgage payment away from selling a kidney to keep their lifestyle intact. I walked in like nothing was wrong. Table 12. Our usual. Her name was still on the seating card beside mine. I turned it face down. The first few people who noticed me alone tried to be polite about it. "Where's Megan?" asked Jenna Walters, the gossip mother hen of the club. I didn't smile. I just sipped my drink and said evenly, "Ask her about Paul." Jenna blinked. Her wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. The gears turned. Fast. I moved on. At the bar, her Pilates instructor asked, "Megan couldn't make it?" Same answer. Ask her about Paul. By dessert, I had repeated the line 6 times. I didn't embellish. Didn't raise my voice. Just planted the seed and walked away. Each time, the person paused. Their pupils darted like they'd stumbled onto a live wire. A name like Paul doesn't sound threatening on its own until you realize it's not the sound of the word that hurts. It's the silence that follows. The whispers began before the dessert plates were cleared. One couple left early, probably to call Megan, just to check in. Another pretended to remember an early babysitter curfew. I watched it all unfold from across the room, silent and still, while the foundation she built on appearances cracked under the weight of a name. By midnight, I was home. Megan was waiting in the kitchen, barefoot, hair pinned back like she was ready for a photo shoot. "How was it?" she asked, too casually. I poured myself a glass of water. "Eventful." She tilted her head. "Anyone ask about me?" I took a long sip, set the glass down, and looked her dead in the eye. "Asked them about Paul." She flinched. Just a flicker, but it was there. I walked past her, up the stairs. By the time I showered and checked my phone, the social fallout had already begun. Her old friends were quiet online. No likes on her last photo. 3 mutuals had unfriended her. The ones who clung to proximity for clout started pulling away, like rats in a flood. She came to bed an hour later. Didn't say a word. Just stared at the ceiling like it held the answers. It didn't. But the question was finally echoing in rooms she couldn't control. The call came at 10:12 a.m. I was in the garage, sanding down a block of cherry wood for a jewelry box I had no real reason to make, except that my hands needed something to shape that wasn't vengeance. The phone vibrated once. Then again. Then it rang, full volume. Megan's name lit the screen, all caps. I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice hit like a siren. "What the hell did you do?" I set the sander down, wiped my hands on a rag, and leaned against the workbench. "Good morning to you too." "They wouldn't let me in, Harold." She barked. "The bank. Our bank. The deposit box access revoked. They said your lawyer filed a reassignment." "What is this?" "It's exactly what it sounds like," I said. Preparation. There was silence for a beat. I could hear the hum of fluorescent lights and the low murmur of a teller asking someone else if they wanted to enroll in overdraft protection. Then, "You transferred everything?" "Not everything. Just the items under my name, which, incidentally, includes all assets placed in the deposit box. Deed copies, titles, bonds, the ring your mother gave us, which, by the way, I insured." "You're welcome." "You bastard," she hissed. "This is theft." "No," I said calmly. "It's logistics. You were always a secondary on that account. Legally, you never held control. And if you check page 9 of the folder I left you, I let the sentence trail off for effect." She didn't respond. "You didn't read it, did you?" "I didn't think you'd actually act." I finished for her. "That was always your mistake, Megan." Assuming stillness meant stupidity. She tried to reframe. "You're doing this to hurt me." "No," I said. "I'm doing this to unbind myself. There's a difference." More silence. "Then, you're humiliating me in public, now this? What next, Harold? Want me to walk into the grocery store and find my credit card declined too?" I didn't answer. Because that had happened. Yesterday. She'd stormed out after receiving the declined message, then came home ranting about how Visa must have glitched. I had nodded sympathetically while transferring more funds into a legally separated account under my LLC. "I didn't take what's yours, Megan," I said now. "I simply reclaimed what was never truly ours." She went quiet again, but it wasn't the silence of confusion anymore. It was the realization of just how much she hadn't seen. "How long have you been planning this?" she asked, barely above a whisper. I looked around the garage, at the smooth wood, at the perfectly labeled drawers, at the blueprint tacked to the corkboard, one I'd redrawn just last month. "Long enough," I replied. Then I hung up. That afternoon, I got a call from my estate attorney. "Denise." She chuckled softly when I picked up. "Got a message from Megan's lawyer," she said, threatening a claim on the safe deposit contents. And I forwarded her the prenup. Page 9. Highlighted. I smiled. "Did you use the yellow or the red highlighter?" "Red," she said. "Felt more appropriate." The crunch of tires on gravel echoed through the trees before I saw her. I was sitting on the cabin porch with a cup of black coffee, watching the steam spiral into the morning air like breath from a sleeping animal. My brother's dog, Boone, stirred at the sound of the car door slamming. He didn't bark, just looked at me, then settled back down at my feet. He knew there was no danger here, just theater. She stepped out of the silver Lexus in flats and a long wool coat, mascara already melting like wet paint down her face. Hair up. No makeup touch-ups. The look of someone who didn't expect to be seen, just pitted. "Harold," she called, walking up the steps. I didn't say anything, just took another sip and let her close the distance. "You didn't return my messages." I raised an eyebrow slightly, almost amused. She swallowed hard, hands shaking around the straps of her purse. "You're destroying me." I let the words hang there. Wind stirred the pine trees behind her, rustling like applause for the performance I'd seen rehearsed in stages over the last few weeks. "You're ruining everything we built," she continued. "I know I made mistakes, but we're not monsters, Harold. We were a marriage." I studied her face, not the tears, but the angle of her jaw. She only tilted her head that way when she lied. I had learned that by year 7. Then I stood, slowly, and picked up the envelope resting on the side table beside me. It was thick, sealed, taped shut. I handed it to her with both hands, like a relic being returned. "What is this?" I didn't answer. She peeled the flap open, her fingers clumsy. Pages slid out, dozens. A printed timeline. 14 months, broken down into key dates, locations, expenditures, emails, voicemails, the paternity report, legal forms, financial transfers, social media captures. Every gaslight she tried to feed me, pinned to a timestamp and cross-referenced with her own words. At the bottom, a one-page letter. I watched her eyes move over the first few lines, then skip to the end. Her hands trembled harder. Out loud, she read the final paragraph. "You built your life on someone else's absence. I'm removing your foundation." She looked up, eyes wide. "What does that even mean?" "It means," I said softly, "that every benefit, asset, reputation you propped up on borrowed lies will collapse. Not because I'm tearing it down, but because you finally ran out of other people to lean on." Harold, I can't do this alone." "You were never alone," I said. "You just thought no one else mattered." She stepped forward, reaching for my arm. "Please, we don't have to burn it all." I stared at her hand. Pale, shaking, polished, still clinging to the illusion that grace would get her what guilt couldn't. Then I stepped back. Boone lifted his head slightly, as if to confirm what came next. I turned, walked inside, closed the door behind me. Didn't slam it, didn't lock it. I just let it settle into the frame like the end of a sentence. She didn't knock again. 2 weeks passed in silence. Not a legal email, not a voicemail, not even a passive-aggressive text with half-baked apologies. Megan had disappeared from my radar like a dying radio station, static where noise used to be. I didn't check in. I didn't monitor her anymore. The chessboard had been cleared, and I had taken my king off the board. But I wasn't done. There was still the matter of the house. The one she bragged about at garden parties as ours, though her name was never on the deed. The one where she hosted wine nights for friends who now ghosted her in public. The one she fought to keep clean while her conscience grew mold in the corners. I had one last thing to send. The courier arrived at her doorstep on a Wednesday. No signature required. Just a box, plain, brown, taped like any other delivery from Amazon. Inside was a single manila envelope. No letter. No sender's name. Just wait. She opened it in the foyer. Next to the coat rack she made me install crooked so guests wouldn't bump their heads. Inside, she found 2 things. The first was a signed and notarized transfer of ownership. The house, her castle, her prize, her anchor, had been legally transferred to someone named Madeline Pierce. A name she didn't recognize immediately. A name that wouldn't register until she remembered our niece, my brother's daughter, who used to visit once a year and leave sticky fingerprints on the glass she'd scolded me for not wiping. Madeline had just graduated law school. Her first job was clerking for my attorney. Now, she owned the house Megan called hers. Fully paid. No mortgage. Megan, for once in her life, had been evicted by kindness. The second item in the box was a photo. Old. Yellowing. It had been taken at a college alumni event. Paul's arm draped around Megan, her face tilted up to his with a grin that could melt steel beams. I'd found it folded inside one of her old poetry books, the kind she pretended to hate. On the back of the photo, in clean, black ink, "Settling doesn't age well." That was it. No threat, no curse, just a truth she had spent decades dodging. When she dropped the box, the photo fluttered to the ground like a loose shingle in a storm. She stood frozen, surrounded by the silence of a life unraveling. She thought she'd played her part well, that she'd controlled the tempo, that love was a resource to be rationed or redirected, depending on who showed up. But all that was gone now. The house, gifted to someone who still knew how to build a future from ruins. The reputation, tarnished by whispers she couldn't smother. The marriage, dead and dissected, the autopsy mailed to her in pieces. And Harold? Vanished. Off the grid as promised. Living in a cabin that wasn't legally traceable to him. Somewhere quiet where the birds didn't need permission to sing and the stars didn't care who cheated on whom. No more questions. No more cleanup. Just peace. She tried calling his old number once. Disconnected. She searched for him online. Nothing. And for the first time in her curated, photographed, performatively happy adult life, Megan stood in a home that wasn't hers, holding a past that finally turned on her. And all she could do was whisper into the emptiness. He really did it. She said it like she was asking for salt. Not a divorce. Not a separation. Just space. Like I was crowding her oxygen. I was standing in the kitchen, holding the ceramic mug our grandson painted last Christmas, still warm in my palm. Claire stood by the sink, sleeves rolled up, half-heartedly rinsing a plate she never even touched during dinner. "I just need space. Time. You understand, right?" she said, as not meeting mine, like even looking at me would crack whatever script she was trying to follow. I didn't answer right away, because I had heard that tone before. Not from her, but from clients. Back when I was running my own contracting crew. It was the same syrupy voice people used right before pulling out of a deal they'd already signed off on, claiming unexpected life changes. The same voice that meant, "I'm already halfway out the door. I just want you to nod so I don't feel guilty about it." So I nodded. "Of course," I said. "That's what you do with termites. You don't scream at them. You don't chase them with a hammer. You nod. Then call pest control when no one's looking." She left the room without another word, the plate still dripping in the sink. I looked at it for a long time, then down at the notebook I kept tucked behind the toaster. Black leather. Spiral bound. Smelled like sawdust and regret. I'd used it during my contracting years to jot down red flags. Clients who smiled too much, changed specs mid-build, withheld checks. Claire had just made the list. "Gentlemen, before I go further, do me one small favor. 98% of you listening these stories never subscribe, and we're trying to hit our first real milestone, 10,000 subscribers. It might be a number on a screen, but to the team working late into the night making these stories hit hard, it's motivation." Now, back to Claire. She didn't follow up that night. No pillow talk. No clarification. Just climbed into bed, scrolled her phone until midnight, then turned her back to me like I wasn't 3 feet away, breathing the same stale air. The next morning, she was already gone by the time I came down. No breakfast made, no coffee. Just a note on the fridge that said, "Back later. Don't wait up." I didn't. Instead, I started packing. Not the dramatic kind of packing. No suitcases. No boxes. I started small. Subtle. My tool belt disappeared from the garage. My passport and license into a fireproof case in the truck. Photos? I scanned the ones that mattered and slid the originals into the attic. I didn't change the locks. I changed my access. Bank account? I opened a new one under just my name. Credit cards? Froze the shared one, citing potential fraudulent activity. She didn't notice. Not right away. She was too busy rediscovering herself. Posting filtered selfies captioned with inspirational quotes. "Sometimes you have to lose yourself to find peace." Her favorite. The irony didn't even sting. It was textbook. She thought this was a chess match. But she didn't realize I'd stopped playing years ago. I was just biding time, waiting for her to make the first arrogant move. Because here's the thing. When a woman like Claire says space, she doesn't mean solitude. She means new attention. Flirtation. She means freedom without consequence. But the second she left that kitchen, I started building something new. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. The kind you get when you've lived long enough to know the difference between a phase and a goodbye hiding behind polite language. By the end of the week, I was signed on to a short-term rental 3 states over, under a different last name. Cash payments. No forwarding address. The only person who knew was my son, and he didn't ask questions. Just gave me a look that said, "It's about damn time, Dad." Claire still had space. She just didn't realize she was floating in it alone. The first thing to disappear was the DeWalt drill. The yellow one I'd had since the Clinton administration. Claire didn't notice. She never stepped foot in the garage unless she needed to throw something on a shelf she couldn't reach. Then went the miter saw. Then the wrench set. Then the Milwaukee charger I never let anyone touch. Claire still hadn't said anything about space again. No follow-up. No apologies. Just silence. As if she assumed her vague request had frozen time. As if I'd just go dormant until she figured out what mood she was in next. She came home from a brunch one Saturday, heels clicking across the hardwood, sunglasses still on indoors. Walked past the living room and paused. "My recliner's gone," she said, half laughing. I was in the kitchen, measuring out coffee beans. "You said you needed space." "Yeah, not less furniture." I didn't look up. It was mine. She didn't answer. Just stood there blinking like a computer stuck on sleep mode. I made sure to leave breadcrumbs, but only the ones that led nowhere. A missing toolbox here. A drawer cleared out there. The kind of vanishing act that makes someone question their own memory. Was it always this quiet in here? Did he always keep his truck keys in that bowl? By Thursday, the truck itself was gone. Claire asked our son, Josh, during one of her half-hearted check-in calls, "Have you heard from your dad?" He said he needed a break too. Josh said, playing it perfectly flat. Didn't say more than that. She tried to laugh again, but this time it cracked. "He's not answering his phone." Josh shrugged. Didn't seem like he wanted to. She hung up after that. No more questions. Just long pauses in her own house, probably wondering why the air felt so still. Why the fridge magnet calendar hadn't been updated. Why the junk drawer didn't have batteries anymore. Meanwhile, I was 3 states away. Small town. Cheap rent. Neighbors who didn't ask questions. I signed the lease under Joseph L. Harper. Harper was my mother's maiden name. I paid 3 months in advance and asked for no mail, no packages. I even swapped SIM cards. My phone was a blank slate. No saved numbers. No cloud backups. Just silence and space. Mine this time. In the evenings, I'd walk by the lake, sometimes with my grandson on speakerphone. We talked about fishing. About school. About how Grandma used to yell when he played with mashed potatoes. He laughed. I laughed. She never called him once. Her version of space didn't include family. I visited a small local lawyer too, just to get things rolling. Nothing aggressive. Nothing loud. Just careful paperwork and strategic filings. Trust realignments. Power of attorney discussions. Contingencies. Claire still had no clue. She thought this was a standoff. That I'd eventually return with my tail between my legs, asking how much space was enough. But what she didn't understand, and what she'd never bothered to learn, is that men like me don't bluff. We measure. We calculate. We don't slam doors. We remove them quietly and carry them out the back. And when we vanish, it's not with drama. It's with precision. Ghost protocol, fully engaged. Claire always mistook silence for weakness. It started with little signals. Those pathetic breadcrumbs she thought looked like independence. A new haircut. An overpriced scented candle habit. Longer walks with her phone glued to her palm and a carefully curated smirk on her lips. She wasn't mourning. She was performing. To her, I was still just sulking somewhere nearby. Probably on the fishing dock, nursing a bruised ego, waiting for her to toss me a breadcrumb of affection so I could come crawling back with my tail between my legs. What she didn't know, what she couldn't imagine, was that by the time she lit her first citrus bergamot for emotional clarity candle, I was watching the sun set over another horizon entirely. No bruises. No sulking. Just me, our grandson, and the quiet. Claire's version of healing involved playing house with nostalgia. She started texting old colleagues. Not the women. The men. The kind who used to give her a little too long of a hug at company parties. The kind who now replied with, "Hey stranger winking face dot." One of them, Mike, if I remember right, started stopping by. He hadn't just been in the neighborhood. The man lives 40 minutes away in a gated condo development. But now he was suddenly checking in on Claire, helping with light bulbs, offering to fix the porch light I already rewired last year. I'd always known Claire loved attention, but now that the steady current of being seen, really seen, was gone, she was desperate to generate it however she could. Then came the posts. Cryptic, cringeworthy, and worse, public. A selfie with her wine glass and a half-lit face. Sometimes you have to lose someone to find yourself. Another with the neighbor's cat on her lap, smirking into the camera. Learning to enjoy life again, one per at a time. Even her bio changed. It used to read, wife, mother, gardener. Now it said, still standing, still learning, still fierce. It was like watching someone build a Pinterest board for their own midlife crisis. She didn't text me. Not once. Not a call. Not even a cheap, hope you're okay. Because again, Claire never reached down to anyone she thought was beneath her. Instead, she posted for strangers. But then, one post caught more attention than she wanted. It was another quote. White font over a forest background. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means choosing yourself. Below it, nestled in the comments under all her wine ant friends going YSSS Queen, was a single reply. You didn't let go. You got replaced. Josh, our son. The same son who now lived with me. She deleted it within an hour. Probably out of embarrassment. Probably after calling him in a rage, only for him to let it ring out. You see, she thought she'd kept the kids in her corner. That blood guaranteed loyalty. That motherhood outranked memory. What she forgot was who taught Josh how to ride a bike. Who sat at every parent-teacher conference. Who spent 3 weekends retiling his bathroom when his landlord wouldn't lift a finger. She might have carried him for 9 months, but I carried him through life. That comment hit her harder than any confrontation ever could. Because it wasn't sarcasm. It wasn't petty. It was surgical. Clean. A line drawn in pixels. You lost more than you know. And by now, she was starting to feel it. Not just the absence of me, but the slow, gnawing realization that I wasn't sulking somewhere, waiting to be invited back. I was living. Without her. With people who knew the difference between space and exile. The lawyer's office smelled like printer toner and stale coffee. Nothing fancy, just a 2-story building with cracked leather chairs and a framed diploma that had faded slightly in the sun. My kind of place. Quiet. Efficient. No frills, no sympathy. Mr. Harper, the attorney said, using the name I'd signed on the lease with. He was in his late 50s, glasses low on his nose, shuffling papers like a blackjack dealer who'd seen it all. We reviewed everything line by line. Durable power of attorney. Updated living will. Healthcare proxy. I signed them all with the same pen I'd used to fill out contractor bids for 30 years. Muscle memory. Then came the trust. I'd set most of it up years ago, but now it needed realignment. Everything Claire and I had built, houses, land, savings, even that beach rental we never used but still paid taxes on, it was all about to be retitled. Not out of spite. Out of preservation. The attorney flipped to a page, paused, then looked at me. This clause, the emergency contact protocol. You want to name someone else besides your wife? I nodded and slid a sticky note across the table. On it, the full name, birth date, and number of my daughter-in-law, Elise. He raised an eyebrow. Not your son. She's sharper, I said. And Claire never respected her. Which is exactly why she'll be the first person Claire calls when the ship starts sinking. He grinned, just slightly. Got it. The clause was simple. In the event of a medical emergency or death-related situation, all decisions about who gets notified and when would fall to Elise. If Claire needed to reach me in a moment of desperation, she'd have to get past the woman she once called an opportunistic little girl with Pinterest goals. I remember the day she said it. Thanksgiving, 3 years back. Elise had offered to help in the kitchen, and Claire had waved her off like a waiter at a cheap diner. Then muttered the insult to her sister while uncorking a $30 bottle of wine she didn't pay for. Elise never said a word. She just smiled, packed up leftovers like nothing happened, and later thanked me for hosting. Claire always underestimated quiet women. She thought control came through volume, through dominance, through being the center of the photo. But Elise? She played the long game. Patient, observant. And now, legally empowered. We went deeper. Revocable trust adjustments. Digital assets redirection. Medical directives filed with 3 local hospitals. Claire's name was removed from every contingency and survivorship clause. If I got hit by a truck tomorrow, she wouldn't even get a voicemail unless Elise approved it. That afternoon, I walked out of that office feeling 20 pounds lighter. Not because I had taken something from Claire, because I had returned something to myself. Control. It wasn't the kind that makes headlines. No screaming. No courtroom drama. Just a paper trail with intention behind every line. While Claire was back home rehearsing her next Instagram quote about the power of forgiveness, I was quietly building a firewall between us that not even her crocodile tears could penetrate. She wanted space? She got it. With concrete, notarized walls, and a guardian at the gate she couldn't sweet-talk her way past. Let her have her brunches. Let her flirt with the memory of men who used to send her heart emojis after happy hour. I had Elise. And Elise had the keys to a door Claire would never be able to knock on again, not without someone else deciding whether it opened. Claire's voice had always had a certain pitch when she was lying, like she was trying to convince herself while entertaining everyone else. It was the same tone she used the time she burned a roast and insisted it was intentional Tuscan style. Now she used it for guests. She started hosting little wine and wine gatherings. Tuesdays, Fridays, weekends if she felt up to it. The house, our house, was suddenly full of clinking glasses and middle-aged women with names like Sharon, Denise, and Tiff with 2 Fs. They sat on the patio I built with my own 2 hands, sipping Merlot I used to pay for, laughing just a little too hard at stories that weren't funny. Claire would swirl her glass dramatically, eyes half-lidded with fake wisdom, and say things like, "Jack and I were just in different phases, you know? We've both grown, but we're being mature about it." Then she'd smirk, like she was letting them in on a secret. "He's probably somewhere sulking without me. Men don't cope well." What she didn't know was that I wasn't sulking. I was grilling burgers with our grandson, and Elise had just helped me file a declaration of removal from the joint account. My deposits, pension, business dividends, and the proceeds from that beach rental I sold behind her back had all been redirected to my new trust. Claire found out the way all entitled people find out. When the card stopped working. It happened at a boutique home decor shop. She was trying to buy a $300 candle holder shaped like a flamingo. I wish I were joking. Declined. Tried again. Declined. She laughed nervously, saying something about chip errors. Tried a different card. Declined again. Later that day, she opened the banking app. Her name was still there. The account was still called Claire and Jack, Household. But there was only one deposit listed for $217. Her deposit. The freelance copywriting gig she took 3 years ago to stay sharp. The rest was gone. She stared at the screen, blinking. Then she dialed my number. It rang once, twice, then straight to voicemail. She texted, "Can we talk?" Nothing. She called again. This time, no ring at all. Just the cold wall of disconnection. But I didn't ghost her completely. A few hours later, an email landed in her inbox from a secured sender. Subject line, Future Communications. It was 3 lines long. Claire. Please route all inquiries through counsel. Best. J. No greeting. No emotion. Just procedure. That email wasn't for information. It was for humiliation. She read it 3 times, like she expected the subtext to appear if she stared hard enough. But there wasn't one. I'd said exactly what needed to be said, and no more. The walls were closing in. She had spent weeks pretending I was licking my wounds somewhere, lost without her, just waiting to be called back like a loyal golden retriever. Now she was realizing something worse than anger. Indifference. That's what really broke people like Claire. Not fury, not fights, but paperwork filed in silence. Cards declined without warning. A phone that doesn't ring back. A man who didn't disappear because he was weak, but because he'd already finished the blueprint for the rest of his life. And she wasn't on the blueprint. The call came in just after noon on a Thursday, while Claire was setting up a charcuterie board for no one. Her sister's voice trembled over the line. "Mom's in the hospital. It's serious. Stroke, they think. ICU." The knife dropped from Claire's hand and clattered against the granite countertop. For a moment, her breath caught in her throat. Not because of the news, but because of the reflex. She needed Jack. Not emotionally, Not romantically, functionally. Because Jack was the one who handled emergencies. Jack booked flights. Jack called the right nurses. Jack asked the right questions in hospital hallways while everyone else was still trying to figure out which wing they were in. Claire fumbled for her phone, thumb shaking over his contact. She dialed. Straight to voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Again. Nothing. She called their son, Josh, for rings. Then voicemail. Her hands were clammy now. She muttered, "Come on, somebody pick up." Her voice cracked halfway through it. She tried Jack's number again. Third time. Then fourth. Fifth. She didn't stop to breathe. The silence on the other end started to sound louder than static. And then, finally, on the seventh try, someone answered. A woman. Not Claire's sister. Not a nurse. Not Elise at first guess. Just a voice. Measured. Clear. Calm as glass. "This is Elise." Claire's mouth opened, but her words stumbled out like marbles on tile. I need to speak to Jack. It's important. It's about my mother. Our family. She's in the hospital. ICU. He'll want to know." A pause. Then the voice, still without a hint of urgency. Jack's asked not to be disturbed. Claire blinked, almost confused. "I said it's important. I understand. I'll let him know, if he decides to respond." Click. That was it. No gasps. No emotion. No room for begging or bargaining. Just silence. And a phone screen that now felt heavier than it should have. She stood there in the middle of the kitchen, the charcuterie board untouched, grapes starting to sweat in the summer heat. She stared at the tile Jack had laid himself 20 years ago, the one she once complained was too cold for bare feet. It felt like ice now. Claire had always relied on the emergency pull cord of marriage. No matter what, Jack would come running when it truly mattered. Because that's what men like him do. They forgive. They fix. They forget the insults once the crisis shows up at the door. But this time, that door didn't open. It was barricaded by something she never believed existed in Jack: resolve. Real, quiet, and absolute. Jack wasn't ignoring her out of spite. He was simply gone, and someone else was standing between them now. And for the first time since she asked for space, she realized just how far that space went. Not just miles. Not just silence. It had structure, voice, authority, and a name: Elise. Claire had dismissed her, talked over her, called her basic and naive. Now that same woman answered Jack's phone and decided what Claire was allowed to say. That wasn't rejection. It was replacement. And it came with no argument. Just a click. Claire arrived at the hospital breathless, keys still in her hand, hair pulled back in a rush that didn't hide the panic beneath her foundation. The woman at the front desk barely looked up as she scribbled down Claire's name on the visitor list. Room 208. ICU. Her mother's name was printed on the whiteboard in dry erase marker like a countdown clock. She pushed through double doors, heels clacking down the hall, past sterile walls and the quiet buzz of machines. Outside the room, she paused, bracing herself for the inevitable flood of emotion. What she didn't brace for was the person already inside. Josh, their son, sitting calmly beside the hospital bed, holding his grandmother's frail hand, lips moving as he quietly read a story out loud. Something about cardinals. Something gentle. He looked older, more composed. And when he looked up and saw her, really saw her, it wasn't warmth in his eyes. It was distance. She stepped inside, voice small. "Josh." He closed the book and stood, slow and deliberate. "You wanted space," he said. There was no venom in it. Just statement. Like reporting the weather. We respected it. Claire blinked. "I didn't mean from you. Things were complicated. I needed time." He nodded once, lips pressed into a thin line. "You had it." She looked at the second chair in the corner, folded and tucked behind an oxygen cart. "Is Jack?" "No," Josh said. Her voice cracked, old panic bleeding through her syllables. "I need to talk to him. Please. He needs to know." Josh didn't respond. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, tapped once, and handed it to her. Voicemail. Not a voicemail. The voicemail. Claire raised it to her ear. Jack's voice filled the space, low and calm. Not angry. Not cold. Just done. "Claire. You left. I didn't chase. I built." Her knees buckled just slightly, but she gripped the railing of her mother's bed. Her mother, who now lay still and pale, unaware of the quiet avalanche crashing just feet away. The message continued. Everything you assumed was shared wasn't. Not the accounts. Not the decisions. Not the future. There was a pause. Not long. Just enough to make her lean in, desperate. Take care of what's yours. I'll do the same. Click. No goodbye. No signature. No crack in his voice. Just a line in the sand drawn with surgical precision. Claire handed the phone back. Josh didn't meet her eyes. She sat at the edge of the bed, trying to feel something she could use. Grief, anger, entitlement. Anything that would justify the growing knot in her chest. But all she felt was stillness. Not the peaceful kind. The kind right before a building caves in. Because the truth she'd refused to consider was now sitting in the chair across from her. Arms folded, eyes tired. She hadn't taken space. She'd been replaced. And no one, not her son, not Jack, not even the failing machines keeping her mother alive, was rushing to tell her otherwise. That chair beside the bed had been filled, and not one soul had saved her a seat. The envelope was thick, padded, hand-delivered. No return address, just her name in block print across the front. Claire found it leaning against her front door like a forgotten Amazon box. For a second, she assumed it was something she'd ordered, a skincare set or a self-help journal. Some curated dopamine hit to distract her from the silence inside the house. But when she picked it up, she felt the weight. This wasn't retail. This was intentional. She took it inside, sat at the kitchen table, and opened it with a paring knife. The blade split the seal like a scalpel. The first page was legal. Not in tone, in form. Stamped. Notarized. A trust amendment. Claire's name, once printed across a line titled Joint Beneficiary, had been cleanly excised. She scanned it 3 times. Removal from shared property trusts. No date of hearing. No warning. No mediation. Just an update. Already filed and final. Her heart started thudding in her throat, but her eyes darted down. The next item was a printed audio transcript with a label at the top. Voicemail, 14 days ago, 10:03 p.m. It was hers. She didn't even need to read the words to know what it contained. She remembered that night, the one where panic drove her fingers to dial Jack over and over, and when she finally gave up, she left a voice message. Tear-streaked. Rambling. Pathetic. In it, she begged. Asked if they could talk. Said she was scared. Said she missed him. And here it was, typed out in Times New Roman, with all the punctuation her desperation had lacked in real time. Reading her own breakdown was a form of violence. Then came the photo. Glossy. 5x7. Clear and composed. Jack, standing at the edge of a small lake. Khakis rolled up, one hand resting on our grandson's shoulder as the boy held up a modest trout, beaming like it was gold. Both of them barefoot. Both of them grinning. Jack wasn't wearing a wedding ring, but the boy was wearing Claire's old sweatshirt, now 3 sizes too big, repurposed as a fishing hoodie. There was a sticky note attached to the bottom corner of the photo. Feminine handwriting. Not fancy, not childish. Just firm. We'll keep him safe. Elise. Of course. Claire dropped the paper like it had burned her. She stared at the photo, not sure whether to scream or sob. But she didn't do either. Instead, she reached for the envelope, hoping, pleading, that something inside might walk back what she'd just read. A PS from Jack. A handwritten "Let's talk." A lifeline. Nothing. The envelope was empty now, except for the echo it left in the room. No confrontation. No yelling. No slammed doors. Just a document. A transcript. A photo. And a woman she'd always underestimated, delivering it all with the precision of a surgeon and the subtlety of a scalpel. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement. Claire hadn't just been cut out. She'd been replaced. Systematically. Silently. And worse. Her grandson, the one she used to spoil with dollar store toys and passive-aggressive hugs, was now being held by a family that had no need for her input. That note wasn't cruel. It was maternal. A message not of revenge, but of custody. And Claire knew, in the pit of her stomach, the kind of truth that doesn't shout. When Jack left, he didn't just walk away. He took everything that mattered with him. Claire waited until the house was dark, Windows shut, candles flickering down to nubs, wine untouched on the counter. The legal documents still sat where she'd dropped them earlier, curled at the corners like dead leaves. She stared at her phone for a full hour before dialing. The number was new. One she'd pulled from an old email thread, buried beneath logistics about taxes and vacation rentals. She hadn't used it yet, hadn't dared. But now, she needed to hear his voice. One more time. It rang twice, then connected. But it wasn't Jack. "Hello," said a voice. Female, calm, unmistakable. "Elise." Claire rasped, throat already tightening. A pause. Then, "Yes. I need to speak to Jack," Claire said, breathless. "Please. It's important." Another pause. Longer. This time, something in Elise's tone shifted. Not unkind, not cruel, but firm, grounded. "Jack's not yours to call anymore." Claire blinked. "Excuse me. He's with us now. He built this family, and we show up." Claire's mouth opened, then closed. Her hand trembled. "I'm still his wife," she snapped, trying to regain footing, trying to matter. There was a silence on the line, so dense it felt like static. Then, calmly, "You were, until you asked for space. And while you were busy trying to figure yourself out, he built something that didn't include you." Claire gasped like she'd been slapped. "This is my husband." "No," Elise said, almost gently. "He was your habit. That's not the same thing." Claire's breath hitched. She felt the tears now, not the performative kind, not the ones you use to win sympathy. These were raw, hot, real, but there was no comfort coming. Only Elise. Steady, immovable. "You chose absence," she continued. "And Jack, he didn't fill that space with revenge. He filled it with people who stay, who answer phones, who hold his hand when it matters. You created the vacancy. He just stopped waiting for you to come back." Claire tried to speak, but the words came out in fragments. I didn't think he'd actually go. I thought he'd wait." Elise offered. "He did. For years. Quietly. Fully. And when he realized you were just keeping him as a placeholder, he built a new life. And this time, he picked who gets to stay in it." Click. Call ended. No last word. No follow-up text. No open door. Just a screen that went dark in her hand. Claire sat alone in the kitchen, the room around her suddenly too quiet, too clean, too empty. No laughter from down the hall. No footsteps. No one waiting in the living room recliner with a book open and tea cooling beside him. She wasn't abandoned. She was replaced, erased so thoroughly that even her title, wife, no longer unlocked the door. She once asked for space, and now that space was filled, but not with her. It arrived in the mail like any other envelope. No courier, no warning, no fanfare. Just a simple white package slipped between a gardening catalog and an ad for replacement windows she'd never request a quote for again. Claire didn't open it right away. She stared at it for hours, letting it sit on the kitchen counter like a dare. Deep down, she already knew. This wasn't an invitation. It wasn't a lifeline. It was a verdict. When she finally sliced it open with the corner of a chipped credit card, 3 documents slid out with surgical precision. The first was cold, clinical. Formal relinquishment of spousal rights. Jack had severed the last legal ties between them. Not with drama, not with a lawyer at her door. Just ink and finality. Effective immediately. The second was sharper. Transfer of medical proxy. He'd reassigned the authority to make life and death decisions for him. Not to her. Not even to Josh. To Elise. Her name printed there, black on white, as the person who'd speak for Jack if he couldn't speak for himself. The third item was handwritten. No letterhead. No signature block. Just a yellowed piece of lined paper torn from a legal pad. 2 sentences. Claire. I didn't vanish. I recalculated. J. Her knees nearly buckled. Not from heartbreak. From recognition. That handwriting, steady, firm, exact, was the same one that used to leave post-it notes on the fridge reminding her to take vitamins. The same scrawl that used to sign anniversary cards with "still yours." Only now, the warmth was stripped away, replaced with surgical intent. She stood in the kitchen, surrounded by curated emptiness. The sofa no longer held his scent. His boots hadn't graced the doorway in weeks. Even the houseplants seemed less green without his habit of turning them toward the sun. Her fingers moved before her brain could object. She grabbed her phone, dialed his number. Again. This time, it didn't go to voicemail. It rang. Once. Twice. Then came the click. A voice answered. But not Jack. A child's voice. Young. Bright. Familiar. Hello. Claire froze. Her breath caught. Evan, she whispered. Their grandson. His voice was warm, curious, totally unbothered. Grandpa says you don't get to talk anymore. She tried to speak. Tried to form words. But the line was already dead. No goodbye. Just that small, devastating sentence, spoken with all the innocence of a boy holding a fishing pole beside a man who no longer carried Claire's shadow. That wasn't cruelty. That was clarity. That was finality. Jack hadn't shouted. He hadn't slammed doors. He hadn't retaliated. He built a life that no longer included her and taught the next generation that some bridges aren't burned. They're simply never rebuilt. The legacy was sealed. And Claire? She was no longer part of the story.